Pledge of Allegiance. All rise.
Heavenly Father, we thank you so much tonight for your love for our lives and your love for this city. We thank you for the city leadership that we have here, and we just pray for your wisdom and discernment tonight in all decisions that will be made and everything that will be discussed. And Lord, we just pray for your will to come to pass in this city, and may your plans and purposes come to pass in every single meeting, in every single decision that has to be made. And so, God, we thank you tonight for your provision and your protection and blessing on the city of Maricopa and the people that live here, along with every person that is serving this city. And so, God, we thank you tonight for your blessing and favor. And in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
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 Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, Vice Mayor. This time we'd like to move to a roll call, please.
Councilmember Chapados?
Here.
Councilwoman Gussie?
Here.
Councilmember Manfredi?
Here.
Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Wade?
Here.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Here.
Mayor Price?
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much. At this time, we have no proclamation, acknowledgements, and awards. I am going to do this other award at the same time as the report from the mayor. That'll take us on into item 4, report from the mayor. Just by way of mentioning, as you all know, today is June 6th, which is the 73rd anniversary of D-Day. If you'd please keep that in mind. And certainly many, many thanks to all those who sacrificed everything for us. At this time, I wanted to give you a quick report on the things that I have been doing on your behalf in the past several weeks since we last met. Had the opportunity to attend several GPEC meetings, the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, from the Board of Directors meetings to the Mayor's meetings, and a variety of other ambassador-type meetings. All of these play out towards moving us in a direction from an economic development standpoint that we just can't get to on our own. We'll talk a little bit about that as they have a item on the agenda tonight. Also attended the JPAC meeting, which is the Joint Legislative Planning and Action Committee. This is all the MPOs, as the Vice Mayor mentioned earlier. An MPO is a Metropolitan Planning Organization. In that time frame, MPOs are someone that helps us with transportation planning, and they're very, very important that we utilize these MPOs to accomplish transportation routes that don't stop at county lines, as you all know. Those lines transfer on. People that live here live and work in other areas, and so we have to be working closely with them, and the more that we do that, the better off we'll be when it comes time to doing things such as potential widening of the 347. As we all know, that crosses a county line, but is absolutely crucial towards for our growth and for our future. Had the opportunity to attend the ICSC, which is the International Conference of Shopping Centers. You've heard me say this many, many times. I don't think I'll ever stop saying it, which is like meeting with different businesses, companies, retailers, hoteliers, developers, etc. And it's like speed dating. You do it every 30 minutes. You don't stop. You go all day. You do it for several days in a row. And basically you spend that time explaining why the city of Maricopa is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And we all know that it is, and so that's a good thing, but sometimes you have some challenging hurdles to overcome. You also learn a lot along the way. You learn why people are not interested in an area. You learn what the challenges that they face are. I'll tell you about a small restaurant that I know you've all heard of, but I won't mention its name. And yet, it's something that everybody understands that we would love to see here in Maricopa. And as we met with them, it was really interesting because as the conversation went, what we found out is that this nationwide chain actually only opens 7 or 8 restaurants a year. And when it does that, it really has challenges with supply chain economics. And those are things that you may never think about. And we think, well, gee, we're attached to a major metropolitan area. This shouldn't be an issue. But what you find out very quickly is that it becomes an issue. And so depending on the amount of stores they have, depending on what their goals are, it really takes us out from a marketplace of being something that they're interested in. Now, through the course of that conversation, we did our best to convince them, and we received some positive follow-up emails on how they were going to do their best to talk the powers that be back into the interest of this area. And so this is what it means to build relationships. If you don't go, you don't get the benefits. It was funny, I ran into a former economic development director from this city, who is now the economic development director of Scottsdale, and she had sent her folks, and she said, now, look out for Maricopa, they're going to be there. And sure enough, I saw her at a meeting this past week, and she says, yeah, dadgummit, I saw them, they're selling the heck out of Maricopa. And so, it's just one of those things that it's why we do it. We do it to really give us a level up, kind of level the playing field, if you will, and really get a good chance at selling who we are. Also had the opportunity to attend the flood control district meeting today. You may or may not know that we have a locally elected flood control district here. It's called the Maricopa Flood Control District. And so had that opportunity. They have an election coming up here in October. I would encourage you to participate in that if you are a landowner or a homeowner and you have the ability to vote. So that's actually something very important as we deal with floodplain mitigation issues here in the city, and something that people don't often think about because it's so dry and hot all the time. But I'll tell you what, it only takes that one time, and so we have those folks planning and trying to help us and working in coordination with us. Also attended the ADOT study session. As you know, I try and attend all the ADOT meetings when and where they may be, depending on different circumstances, but these are always helpful. People tell me all the time, well, why don't we have this road, or why is this road that's so important to me not on the list, and why are we not in the 5-year plan? And the reality is that, I've told you this many times, that book of plans of needs is probably that thick on a, 3.5 by, an 8.5 by 11 spreadsheet. That's probably a book of 3 or 4 inches thick, and those are just the needs in the state of Arizona. There's lots of need, never enough resources to go around, and so if you want to move up through that, you have to do a variety of things. You have to be there, you have to be present, you have to explain the needs, you have to showcase the issues that are here, and you also have to come bearing money. If you don't have that and you can't leverage those resources, then at the end of the day, you tend to stay down at the bottom of that 8.5 by 11, 500-page booklet that's attached. And if you want to move to the top and get our projects done, you have to be present. And then finally, we did some filming for some city exposure here this past week with Channel 15. If you want and are sitting around a television tomorrow at between 9 and 9:30, we'll have a piece running on the air that is with Snore and Living. That's Channel 15. It will be a piece about the city, about education here, and about a whole variety of things, our library, and some other amenities. And we think that that's another good way to touch people outside of the area and hopefully encourage folks to move here, businesses to relocate here, and expansion to happen. And then also we had the opportunity to I sit on the RTA board, which is the Regional Transit Authority or Transportation Authority board. This is something that was just approved by the board. I want to make you all aware of it. The Transportation Authority has been organized and therefore referred to the Pinal County Board of Supervisors. And what that will do is it will propose a half-cent sales tax throughout all of Pinal County, and that half-cent sales tax, if passed by the voters this November, would then go towards projects that are outlined and specifically listed in that RTA. We've just gotten the final draft of it. We have 2 specific projects in it, the widening of 347. Again, that takes a variety and a host of partnerships with MAG and ADOT and MCDOT and Pinal County and a host of others, ourselves included, Gila River, Ak-Chin, etc. But we also have another project in there, which is what we call the East-West Corridor, which is an additional route that passes north of Casa Grande and kind of southeast of Maricopa that leads to the I-10. And basically it would create a corridor, a highway, if you will, that creates an alternative access of somewhat faster means to the I-10. The challenge that Maricopa often has is that we cannot just go directly through what everyone wants to do, which is go up the 347 and then just cut to the east and go straight across the I-10. That would be crossing Gila River's sovereign property, and we just can't do it. We're not allowed to, nor would they allow us to. So again, we have to work around Gila River, and if you haven't looked at a map lately, they are a very large reservation. jurisdiction and they have their own rights. And so we have to go around that. And so we are always looking for ways to do that. And so those are the two proposed projects that would directly affect Maricopa. But I would issue this nature of caution, and while taxes are always a touchy issue and nobody likes them, and so I certainly don't want to pay more than I have to, being in a burgeoning county such as Pinal County, we're always trying to grow. And as we have more and more people move here, as we want more and more businesses to come here, you have to have one key piece to economic development, and that is good transportation. If you don't have a good transportation system, you cannot move goods and services. You cannot get the things that you want here. And so while it may be difficult to be pioneers in our own right, the reality is that's what you are. You're pioneers, and as such, you're being asked to pay for things that will pave the way to many great years of prosperity and growth ahead. And so again, I would encourage you to look at that RTA as it comes to the ballot, make yourself aware of it and known about it, but it doesn't just get paid by the city of Maricopa taxpayers, it's all of Pinal County, and it helps all of Pinal County in a variety of ways. So with that, that is some of the things that I have here, but last but not least, we want to do a presentation to our finance department. So Brenda, would you come on up? So every year in my State of the City, one of the things I like to do is express what we are doing from a financial perspective. Those of you who know me know that I'm a financial advisor. It's something that I do. I like budgets, believe it or not, and when most people's eyes glaze over, I actually pay attention. And so one of those things that is very interesting as we comb through our budget is the difficulties and challenges that we have as a city trying to make sure that we provide all of the services and all of the things that are so important to everybody in this room and beyond. And I could go through and ask each of you what's the most important thing in the city, and you'll all give me a different answer. And the reality is that's the way we try and budget. How do we provide everything to all of you and be all things to all people with a very limited amount of funds? And that's really, really difficult. But then you take it one step further, and when you are dealing with city budgets, everyone thinks it's just one big giant pot of money. And the reality is anything but. It's a whole bunch of pots of money. And people think, oh, that's great, I got more pots, I got more money, right? Well, the reality is that's not always the case. It's just more pots. And each pot has a restriction to it. And those restrictions have been outlaid by the state of Arizona and the legislature. And they dictate to us how those pots can be used. And when money comes in from a developer for a certain perspective, that money can only be used for those types of things. Maybe it's for the street, maybe it's for the lighting, maybe it's for a park. You have all these different rules and regulations. And so while people will always say, well, you spent money here and not there, I don't get it. Well, you had a pot of money available there, but not over here. And so all those things play out. And so what we want to do today is congratulate Brenda Hassler. Today we have won once again the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. This is from the Government Finance Officers Association, and it is one of the most prestigious awards that a government can earn. We have earned this 5 years, 6 years in a row now? This is the 8th year in a row. So, needless to say, whatever you may think about our dollars and budgets, the fact of the matter is we are doing our absolute best to be worthy stewards of your tax dollars. And so again, this is just another way that the organization has scrutinized us, has audited us, and has shown that once again we are hitting those numbers. We are telling you where those dollars are going. They are actually going. And so we want to congratulate our finance department and the city of Maricopa. Congratulations, Blaine. Come out. Perfect. Well, with that, that concludes the report from the mayor. We'll move to the report from the city manager at this time.
Honorable Mayor, council members, there are a few items that I would like to report to you on tonight. First, starting off with the grade separation project for 347. As you know, I've been meeting with the various businesses that will be impacted by that project. You also are aware that the construction phase of that starts in October. However, the pre-construction has already started. So we are making our best efforts to ensure that we communicate well with all the businesses there that will be impacted I've asked Denise Earhart, our Economic Development Director, to be the point person for that project. In addition to having one person, we're going to create a hotline. So if any business owner is having problems, they have one person to contact, one number to call, and that information regarding the point person and the hotline. In addition, we are also providing or developing a website so that if for some reason we want to have multiple points of contact. So we'll try to do a good job with getting information out through our websites, through email, but also we want to have a place where people can go to that they can see firsthand kind of what the status of that project is and what's to come. So if there's going to be some issues regarding closures, we want them to know that and have a spot to go to. So we believe that when we look at identifying the point person, the website, email contacts, and hotline, we think that we at least have a strategy that will be successful when the construction actually starts. And so I've been out with the businesses and have received some really good ideas. One example that I received today was the creation of a massive text messaging, getting everyone's business telephone and actually do text messaging, which people, I'm told, respond to. I'm not a millennial, so I'm just guessing here. The other item I would like to report on is the truth in taxation notification that went out on, I believe, Friday of last week, and there was certainly some confusion regarding it. We were trying to comply with the new state statute governing the information that needed to be included in that notification, as well as the font size. So it was very particular regarding that. We have since submitted a new notification, so additional information regarding that, and it clearly states in that new notification that there is no tax rate increase. So in fact, the primary property tax rate is remaining at $4.78 per $100 of assessed valuation. The secondary property tax is actually reducing from $1.69 to roughly $1.40. So the combined tax rate is going to reduce overall. So there is no tax rate increase. It's similar that if you were purchasing an item, and if you purchase more of it, then you would end up paying more taxes for that. Here's the situation. If your home value does not change, then you will pay the exact same amount in taxes that you paid the prior year or this fiscal year. It's only if your home value increases that you will be impacted. The third item I'd like to talk a little bit about has to do with agenda item 1016 that's on your agenda tonight. I think that we all agree that the services for the Victim Advocacy Center are certainly needed. I believe that this is a regional service that will be provided. And not only will residents from Maricopa benefit, as they should, but also residents throughout Pinal County, as they should. But in saying that, I believe that if we are going to provide a regional service, then it should be the regional community that should embrace and want to provide that service. So the costs for doing so should be spread out to more than just the taxpayers here in Maricopa to pay an equitable amount. So my recommendation, I know that Chief Stahl is interested in making sure that the organization can be responsive, and we agree on that part. But I believe that a nonprofit organization that is headed by the Chief of Police can also be very responsive. So that is my recommendation on that item. Finally, there's one other item. We had a water safety day, and I'm told that we have a video of that water safety day. So I would bring up Chief Leffler to introduce that item.
Every summer, the fire department, along with the rest of the city departments, sponsor a Water Safety Day. It was held on May 26th. It was a tremendous success. I think Councilmember Chapados referred to it earlier today. I think we gave away 350 or 400 hot dogs. It was crazy for that day, and it was warm. But it's appropriate to send that message to watch your kids around water. This is the time of year when these needless tragedies happen. We have several members of our department and people in the city that are very passionate about this topic. And apparently there's a short video that kind of gives you a glimpse of what took place that day. So enjoy.
Thank you.
Well, we brought them out today. It's getting hot, so we figured we don't have a pool at the house, and we're all members of the Copper Sky, so thought we'd come out and check it out.
Today we're having our 5th annual Water Safety Day. We're here at Copper Sky Recreation Center, and we're sharing a message about water safety and about the ABCs of water safety. And the ABCs of water safety is adult supervision, B stands for barriers, and C is classes.
Events like this are important to me because I am not a very, very strong swimmer, and my kids love to be in the pool. So as long as I know that the surroundings have the safety precautions available and that they know what to do if something does go wrong, then the more comfortable we are coming out and participating.
So what we're hoping that people get from here is watch your kids around water. We hear it all the time, especially during the summer months, but it's really as simple as that. With an adult or a swim buddy watching a partner, it's almost impossible for somebody to drown.
Christy, make sure you send something to each one of them for a membership, too. Mayor, that concludes my report.
Perfect. Thank you very much. At this time, before we move to item 6, the call to public, I failed to announce that we do have the President of the Flood Control District, Dan Frank, in the audience, as well as Pinal County Attorney Volkmar as well. So appreciate you being here this evening. Thank you. At this time, we'd like to move to the call to the public. I do have one speaker card, so we'll let that person go first, after which anyone else who wishes to approach the podium, you may please do so. You can tell us what's on your mind. We have a little timer up here. It logs about 3 minutes, just to make sure we have enough time for anybody who wants to talk to us. We do listen to everything that's said, but just know that because it's not agendized, according to state law, we can't do much in the way of answering from the dais. But again, we have staff folks that will be happy to get that information, and then we'll follow up with you. And again, you know where to find us. We're always around to talk to you. So with that, please, Shelley Gillespie, if you'd come on up.
It's down so I can actually talk into it. Good evening, and thank you, Mayor, Council, staff, and residents. I'm here to update. I'm Shelley Gillespie, co-founder, and executive director of Copa Shorts Film Fest, and I'm here to update everyone on what's going on in the festival. And it's all about the numbers as we go into our second year. We've already received our first 2 films for the new veterans category of the festival, which I'm very excited. It's a very appropriate night to announce that. And the films were excellent. So we've got a small, steady stream, and it will get better as the procrastinators move through. We have some major programs that we're starting, and we're looking for funding on them. One is new and quite exceptional. Those of you on the council who were at the parties at the festival might remember Brent Michael Davids, who wore the black top hat, and he is an expert Native American composer of film scores, and he is offered to do a program. There is a cost involved. I mean, he's a professional, and we're looking for funding because we're going to do something that's really extraordinary. It gives a career path for up to 5 people, and he's done this for 2 years now already at the Green Bay Film Festival. So he's offering to do it for us. He has a mom in Glendale, so he's willing to come to our area. But he was the scorer of the award-winning Native American film in our festival. So he was very impressed with our festival. He likes us, and he's offered to do this program. We would do it early in the next year, assuming we get some funding with one of the grants. and we would have students nominated by musical directors, either from college, CAC, or the high schools, so that he could work with them very closely for about a month. And at that point, once they've created a film score, he's already talked to his friends at the Phoenix Symphony, where they have string quartets that they're going to give us a special rate, and they will record those scores and put them with one of our films from next year's festival. So we're very excited about that. It's a very lucrative career to be a film scorer. Think John Williams and Star Wars, millions, right? So we're looking for grant funding. Another thing we had was last year we had one workshop with CAC. Now, due to their generosity, Central Arizona College is providing 3 locations. We're going to do 3 workshops. One on the 13th of September at Signal Peak, one on the 14th at Maricopa, and one on the 19th at Santan. The programs will be very hands-on. They're free to anyone who attends. They have already been funded through CAC's work. And the mornings focus on elements of screenwriting. The afternoons will involve workshops on cameras, lighting, sound, and I'm running out of time. Oops. We'll also be offering 4 free workshops at the festival, the morning of the festival, instead of the 2 we had. And we have a special program that we're working on, and we're starting to do. This is a teaser. We're going to be doing a program with the Maricopa Library. And we have more details. We'll be at the next meeting to talk about that. So I've just run out of time, but we've applied for 6 grants. It's all about the money, the numbers, and the participation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shelley. Appreciate it. That was the speaker card I had. I would like to open the call to the public. Would anyone like to come up? I did receive a number of speaker cards for item 10.7. I'll call all of you up to talk to that item as we get to it. At this time, seeing no one, we'll go ahead and close the call to the public and move on to the minutes. We do have a correction on the minutes. Councilmember Chapados.
Yes, I need to make a correction on the regular session minutes for May 16th on item 10.3. I went back and listened to the tape, and it was my error. The actual proposed dates are February and March, not January and February. September and October are still correct. The other thing in the minutes, at the beginning, it was stated that I participated in the discussion but recused myself from any vote, yet I'm acknowledged as voting in favor of the project, and I just want to make sure we correct that.
Okay, so any other corrections on the minutes at this time? Seeing no one, can I have a motion to approve with the correction?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
The motion carries. Thank you. At this time, that takes us, we have no public hearings, and so we'll move on to item 9 on the consent agenda. Council, don't think we had anything to discuss on the consent agenda, as that time was given earlier. So with that, can I have a motion to approve consent, please?
So move.
Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion on consent? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. And that'll take us to tonight's regular agenda. We're going to start off on item 10.1. The mayor and city council shall discuss and possibly take action on appointing a citizen to fill the vacancy on the age-friendly citizen advisory committee. This is for discussion and action. This is my appointment. Council, as I told you at the time, that there were a few that I hadn't had an opportunity to fill. So I would like to bring forward to tonight Viola Najjar. Viola, are you in here? I didn't see you come in earlier. Viola is a recent graduate of the Citizens Leadership Academy, has been a regular participant in a variety of different things. We had a wonderful conversation, and so I would like to submit to you, Council, for your vote of approval, Viola Najjar. With that, I would like to motion. Councilmember Manfredi, do you second?
Second.
That being said, is there any further discussion on that item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion carries. That'll take us to item 10.2. The mayor and city council shall discuss and possibly take action on reappointing 2 citizens to the merit board. These are current folks that sit on the merit board. Remember, the merit board is a 3-member board, and so it's not something like on all the other boards that there's 7 where we each do an appointment, and therefore they have been contacted and would like to continue to serve. So with your vote of approval and a motion and a second, we will move towards that action. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on these items? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? That motion further carries. Item 10.3, the Mayor and City Council shall discuss and possibly take action on appointing one citizen to fill a seat on the Cultural Affairs Advisory Committee. This is for discussion and action. This is also me, as I had another vacancy, so just, I know, sorry. I'll be quiet here in a minute. With that, that takes us to, had another wonderful conversation, always looking for people to serve, and so we'd like to bring to you this evening for your approval, Council, is our citizen Constance Jackson. Constance, are you there? I see you in the back. Come on, stand up. So this is Constance Jackson. She has been so kind as to volunteer to serve, and so we always thank people that are willing to help us get all the things done that we need to. And so with that, I would motion to appoint Constance Jackson.
Support.
There's a second. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you, Constance, for being willing to serve. We appreciate it. Item 10.4, the Mayor and City Council shall discuss and possibly take action to approve an updated agreement between the Greater Phoenix Economic Council and the City of Maricopa in an amount not to exceed $27,464 and will be funded from General Fund, Economic Development, Membership, and Dues. This is for discussion and action. Denise.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the Council. The City of Maricopa has been a GPEC community partner for about 5 years. The organization, as you know, works to support expansion and relocation of projects for companies considering the region. GPEC has a dedicated business development team, research and strategy, as well as support staff. The organization was named Top 10 Economic Development Organizations in the U.S. by Site Selection Magazine, a national publication geared towards those in the decision-making process for expansion and relocation. Award winners are determined based upon 6 criteria. That is total projects, total investment associated with those projects, total jobs associated with those projects. And those same criteria are compared with or calculated per capita for the metro area. What that means is the region has relocation attributes most in demand by capital investors. So today we have Mitchell Allen, VP of Business Development Industrial with GPEC, to talk about how the city benefits from our relationship with GPEC. Please help me welcome Mitchell Allen.
Thank you, Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Perfect. Thank you. So to tell you a little bit about the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, for those in the audience who may not be aware of it, we are the regional economic development organization solely focused on attracting businesses to the Greater Phoenix region. We were founded in 1989, and since our inception, we've helped over close to 700 companies locate within the region. Those companies have created over 120,000 jobs and invested over $13 billion in the community. We also represent 23 municipalities, including City of Maricopa, the county, and we have 170 private side investors. Where our services kind of come into play and where we really shine is our in-depth market data analysis. So we have a team of 6 researchers, 6 interns underneath that research team, cranking out data to help position ourselves when clients are looking at the market to really showcase why Greater Phoenix and really selling the region as a whole. We also work to evaluate operational cost benefits and do analysis between us and other markets. So oftentimes we're competing between our region and, let's say, Dallas, Salt Lake City, California, on the southeast or in the East Coast. Additionally, we have an international strategy. So we're in Mexico, we're in Canada, we're in Asian markets and in Europe, and we continue to promote, on an international basis to promote business, again, to the Greater Phoenix region. And then connectivity to key resources. So when a client is looking at expanding, how do we make it easy for them? How do we work with not only our community partners, but our private partners to assist them to ensure that there are no hurdles when they're going through that process, whether it be the zoning, whether it's hiring, whether it's identifying schools for the CEOs or the employees. So it's a full service organization, again, committed to growing the region and diversifying the economy. So if you look at the City of Maricopa regional results summary, the first column there is FY17. I do want to note that the numbers that are posted here are only through April 30th, so our fiscal year runs from July to the end of June. So there's a few months of unreported information, but we're having an excellent year this year. With 31 companies who have announced as of April, and we have another 4 or 5 that announced in May that aren't reported in this. So when companies are looking at expanding into the region and they make that final decision, what we're finding is that those employees that company may hire don't always live in that city or that town that the company actually is located in. Oftentimes they're in neighboring communities, whether it be in the Southeast Valley or City of Maricopa or the West Valley or Phoenix, whatever that case may be. When a company locates, it's impacting the entire region as a whole, not just that one particular community. And so what we have found is over the last 5 years, the companies that we have helped and assisted locating within the region have created over 738 jobs where those jobs are located, or those residents are located within Maricopa. And additionally, again, that multiplier effect, not only the company and those residents, but that are creating jobs, we're also seeing when those employees are hired, they're also creating jobs in addition to that. So that creates a demand for the service industry when someone has a job and they have additional disposable income. So it's not just the one job, it's kind of looking at the overall system as a whole. So the return on investment, and I apologize, the slide's a little bit off from a font standpoint, but is a 9-to-1 for this year. So every $1 invested is creating a direct revenue of $9 to the community. That's up from 7-to-1 as of last year. Additionally, if you look at that multiplier effect, not just the direct jobs, but the indirect jobs, and you're seeing a 17-to-1 return on investment. Quite a benefit for the contract amount that we're seeking today. And again, we hope that we see your continued support. So just kind of recapping last fiscal year, we had 3,000 high-wage jobs created. It's a payroll of close to $400 million with an average high-wage salary of $70,000. And then total jobs created was 7,700. Companies that were included in that, Cardinal IG, the glass company, DaVita, Dexcom, Galvanize, to name a few. When we're looking at this fiscal year, our action items for this fiscal year include an intensified outbound campaign towards California companies. So we're seeing roughly 30 to 35% of our prospects are coming directly from California, many of which are looking for a complete relocation out of that state and into a more cost competitive one, such as Arizona. We're also building the community talent attraction and workforce pipeline and working with our state partners, the university partners, the community colleges, and our communities and as a whole, because workforce tends to be the #1 factor when a company is looking at expanding. So it's great that we can get the first 50 to 150 jobs, but how do I scale above and beyond that? And workforce is key. There's a national shortage in a lot of different industries. How do we continue to promote those job industries and those specific jobs, but create that pipeline that will allow for additional companies to continue to thrive here. I touched on the foreign direct investment. With the action item that was listed as of last year was creating an aftercare program. So it's not just once a company locates, we're hands off. It's how do we take care of them, not from the moment they sign the lease and beyond, so that those companies aren't leaving in 2 or 3 years. We want to create a sustainable economy with those companies that we locate. And then advance our competitiveness. We're constantly looking at how to position ourselves and how to find ways that to incentivize, whether it be through statutory incentives or finding ways to just broaden our appeal to companies that are looking at the region as a whole. And then in collaboration with Velocity, going back to workforce, again, that tends to be the number one or number two reason or factor that a company would be looking to relocate or expand into the region. If you look at this year's prospect activity, we've had 285 active prospects. We've had about 20% of those active prospects are from outside of the U.S. And the prospect activity is up from last year. When you look at numbers, so we do send out what we call e-tracks to our communities when we have a qualified prospect looking at the market that is looking to identify site selection sites around the region. We've had roughly 50 or so prospects that we've e-tracked, and your staff in economic development have been phenomenal at responding to those and sending out information that's relevant and that shows City of Maricopa in a very positive way. And then of those active prospects for this fiscal year, we're showing they have a potential for roughly $11 billion, 41,000 jobs potentially to be created, and an absorption of 36 million square feet. When you look at the actual breakdown of activity, we're seeing roughly 44% of our activity in manufacturing. We're still seeing a lot of advanced business services, that back office, financial services, looking at the market. Still some warehousing and distribution, some research and development, and headquarters. We saw an uptick from last year. Several headquarters made announcements in the region, which is very positive for us. If you look at the prospects by region, again, 28% are coming from California, so 61 of the 200 plus prospects are from that market, which is a little bit higher than usual. If you look at a breakdown of prospect activity as a whole from the office standpoint, we have roughly 80% of our prospect activity are looking for existing space. So if you look at by square footage, seven prospects of 93, we're looking at 200,000 square feet and above, and then so forth. But again, the one thing I want to point out here is that from an office standpoint and on the industrial front, most of our clients are looking at existing space only. They're looking for existing space that it helps eliminate those uncertainties, and that they can go in and it's turnkey. Or if they are looking at land or build-to-suit opportunity, they are looking for infrastructure in place, ready to go, so that they can be operational as soon as possible. Again, on the industrial side,
Mitch, hold on a second. We have a
Yes.
Question from Councilmember Chapman.
Absolutely.
What's the current inventory for existing space that's available for these leads?
It depends through the mayor, Councilwoman, it depends on the submarket. So there's on office, it's roughly a vacancy rate of 18 million. I don't know the total square footage. On industrial, it's probably closer to 10%. Some communities have a vacancy rate much higher than that. Some have a vacancy rate much lower. So there is space out there, but a lot of the space that is out there is either obsolete or it's brand new. So does that answer your question?
It does.
Thanks, Mitch.
And then on the industrial side, we're seeing activity, clients that are looking for existing space in the 60% range, 61%, with 18% of those clients looking at build-to-suit opportunities. So again, the real takeaway here is that clients are looking for a space to go into now. It's kind of almost like the first-time home buyer. A lot of them don't want to modify the house. They want to be able to. They want it to be move-in ready. It's the same concept. If you look at our media activity for this fiscal year, we've seen over 500 million unique likes. So people, GPEC's name being mentioned in the news, whether it be through articles, whether it be through blog posts, through LinkedIn, through Twitter, the multiple facets that get our name out there, and we continue to grow that, and we've got some very unique tools that we're using that help get not only the region's branding and kind of our branding initiatives out there, but the state and our community partners. So what we're doing for this upcoming fiscal year, which starts in July, we've developed a unique analytics tool that one of our researchers put together, Albert Stanton, where it's identifying certain measures to predict what type of industries will be coming or potentially looking at our market next. And we're trying to get in front of those so that we can start calling on those companies around the U.S. and around the world sooner before they, so we can get in front of them before they really start to evaluate or potentially nix Arizona from that list. Again, we're always focusing on advancing our competitiveness through different legislative policies or through workforce initiatives. And we continue to focus on media. So one thing, I kind of touched on it earlier, we're able to identify people who are looking at our website through their unique IP address. And we're actually able to call on those companies, and we've had some success stories where a company was looking at our website. Within 3 or 4 days, we get a notification. We send a notice to that client or to that potential client via LinkedIn or some other form, and then we're getting a response back and actually meeting with those clients. So it's we don't often tell them that we have that capability. So it's just happenstance that we come across them, but it's a great way for us to stay in front of folks that might be looking at our website and looking at some of the materials. Additionally, we're also doing something called geofencing, where before we go to a conference, we're actually able to take the longitude and latitude of that particular conference, and anyone who's within that geofence and doing any type of tweeting about a conference, we're actually able to strategically target those individuals and give them Phoenix-based branding, or excuse me, greater Phoenix-based branding. Additionally, we have a very unique branding effort that we've put out called the Connected Place. It's really us pushing out the new Industry 4.0 sensor technologies. So really where we're seeing the growth and the advanced manufacturing and where the future is going to take us. So it's everything from autonomous vehicles, new technologies in warehouse and distribution when it comes to e-commerce, as the e-commerce continues to thrive. Again, I mentioned sensor technology, so everything from your smart phone to your Apple Watch to your Fitbit to your I have an automated garage door opener where I can see my garage open and close, and I can, I leave the house and I'm going, oh shoot, did I close it? I can just pull it up on my app. So again, some very unique things there, and really kind of creating this new brand for the greater Phoenix region. And that is all I had today. Are there any questions I can help answer?
Council, questions this time? No one? Again, I spend more time than anybody down at GPEC, as you know. Economic development is so complex, and it's something that I'd actually like to see. I'm going to work with the council members here this coming year. I'd like to have all of you come with me a little bit more to GPEC. It's something that, while I cannot do, yourself, Mitch, or Chris Camacho, who's the president, justice when you start talking about the in-depth level that we go here. But there's just so much more. And I know at the end of the day, it's always about locates and jobs. That's what we're paying for. But there's so much more when you talk about winning a locate. I often refer to Lucid. People say to me, well, why didn't we win Lucid? And I say, well, you have to understand the parameters that they were looking for. And maybe our infrastructure wasn't there yet. Maybe Casa Grande's a 100-year-old city. We're a 14-year-old city, and so there are some real disparate differences there. But that doesn't mean that we're not qualified in certain avenues. But that means we're going to raise to the top of the list in certain areas, and we're going to lower in others. And so it takes this team of people working behind the scenes over many years. And when you talk about Lucid, that deal was in the pipeline just between the ACA, the governor's office, GPEC, Casa Grande, and many others. For 5 or 6 years in which they were trying to lure them to that area. And so it takes a lot of behind the scenes work work and a lot of data, a lot of courting, and so that's what it takes. It takes a whole team of people. And I often look at our own team, and while we have a great qualified team, we're a team of 3. Instead of a team of 26 of some of the smartest people down at GPEC, and then couple that with the ACA and other locations. So, when you go head to head for these big businesses, for even small businesses, you better have your T's crossed and your I's dotted, and if you don't, then you're just going to get put in the trash because everybody else that you're competing with does, and that's what it boils down to. So, you have to kind of fake it till you make it, so to speak, but at the same time, you got to be participatory and you have to show up. So, like I said, I think it's a good thing for us, and with that, Council, I would look for a motion if there's no other questions. Yes, Councilmember Gussie.
One more question. I'm going to take you up on your offer. I haven't been to a GPEC meeting in quite some time, in a couple of years. But I did have some questions for you. Regarding the 738 jobs that for Maricopa residents, how many of those jobs were actually here in Maricopa?
So the last time we had I actually don't remember the last time we've had a locate within the city of Maricopa. As I mentioned, a lot of those jobs, when a company locates, like Lucid goes to Casa Grande, those residents aren't going to necessarily live in Casa Grande. They may live in City of Maricopa. They may live in Ahwatukee, Tempe, Chandler, Gilbert. And so, we have a program that we use that helps us, and it's a standardized program that all of our communities have kind of bought into, called InPlan, that allows us to identify over the locates that we've had over the last 5 years, based on that location and kind of the standard commute times and patterns that we see, how many of those residents potentially on a percentage will be in Maricopa, and that's how we came up with that 738. So we do understand that most of your residents do commute, and so I can't say that I don't have a number for you as far as any companies that have located in Maricopa, but we have estimated that 738 residents who live here are employed by the companies that we have helped locate to the region.
And as you mentioned, and it's always been an issue for Maricopa, is the lack of infrastructure. But you also mentioned that, I can't remember the number, that have located companies. When was the last time that we had a prospect in Maricopa through GPEC that actually came here, visited us, and thought about considering Maricopa as a prospect?
Going off of memory, I want to say it was about 4 years ago. Again, the biggest concern for our clients and the consultants that we work with has been existing product. So if there's nothing for them to look at, if it's just dirt, they tend to pass it up. And if it is dirt, they're looking for specific infrastructure needs, whether it be Southwest gas, water, wastewater demand, infrastructure, fiber, directly to the site, and it can't be within 2 miles or a mile and a half, because that not only costs time, but it also costs money.
All right, thank you.
So, Councilor, is there a motion?
Mayor, I move to approve the contract with GPEC.
Okay. Is there a motion? There's a second? The motion and a second. Any further discussion on the item? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us to item 10.5. This is a resolution of the Mayor and City Council of the City of Maricopa approving and adopting a development agreement between the City of Maricopa and the Maricopa Development LLC, a Delaware Limited Liability Company, or Maricopa Development. There's a whole bunch of other stuff on here I'm not going to read unless I absolutely have to, which is great, and that takes us to discussion and action. As I understand, we don't have an official presentation for this DA, but Bill, do you want to just kick it off here?
Mayor Price, members of council, and Bill Fay, the Public Works Director. There are several entities that had a hand in drafting this document. Essentially, Tortosa South is the ironically named southern portion of Tortosa. It's bounded by Murphy Road, Hartman Road, the alignment that would be Bolin Road, but is actually a line really in Kelly Anderson's property to the south, the farm, and Honeycutt Road on the north. A little bit of it is developed. Most of it is 11 undeveloped parcels owned by different investors. Over the years, Tortosa as a whole did an original agreement and then split apart. There were some bankruptcies involved. There were some agreements and maybe kind of sort of agreements, letters written and disavowed and added to, and we ended up with kind of a mess of entitlements over time. and nobody in particular had a absolute strong, rock-solid position as to who necessarily had to do everything. The parties got together over quite a bit of time, probably I would say really the last 7 or 8 years, but in more energy the last 2 years, to nail down what exactly every party's obligations are. So all of the various letters, agreements that have been made, obligations that have been entered into or not quite entered into, are now actually recorded in a solid document that can be relied upon. In addition to it, once we got into the attempting to, and really the fundamental piece here is who is responsible for building the perimeter roads. Murphy Road is almost entirely built. It's really the back of the curb for about 300 or 400 feet that's left, so it's a fairly trivial portion, but the second half of Hartman Road and all, or at least the northern half of Bolin Road, are multi-million-dollar expenses that may have been already paid for with the completion of Honeycutt Road, or maybe they weren't. That's kind of the answer. Essentially what this does is it splits the costs. There are developer impact fees, additional rooftop expenses that are contributed in order to help pay for that, and then other impact fees will pay for the rest of the roads when and if they become necessary. Hartman will become necessary relatively quickly. Bolin Road is a more complex topic. And finally, at the request of the Public Safety Division, all of our properties pursuant to city code and fire safety code particularly require 2 points of access. And this property technically makes it in that you can come in from Honeycutt from the east or the west. And Honeycutt from the west is relatively straightforward. You go from the fire station up Hartman Road and in. But if that's blocked, then the answer technically would be you come in from Honeycutt from the east side, which is a great answer, except for the fact you've got a 20-minute drive on dirt roads and through the forest and over the hills and through the woods and everything to get to that other side. It legally makes it, but it's a very poor theoretical choice, and in the time it takes to get, 20 minutes is an exaggeration, but it does involve having to run on dirt roads and all kinds of messiness. So the DA exacted an agreement from the development group that they would install an emergency access at the southwest corner of their property. It's not the ideal location in terms of the actual development itself, but it's the only location where you can enter that isn't cut off by a canal. So we'd actually have to build a bridge anywhere else. With that, I will take any of your questions.
Council, questions on this topic? Yes, Councilmember Chapdos.
So, Bill, just so I understand, this temporary emergency access is interim until that particular parcel is completed, and at such time a secondary access point will be identified and completed, or what?
I do not believe, Dennis, is that is not when that individual parcel develops.
Right. No, I think that access could be more of a permanent access unless another one develops. I think right now, once we decide where it's going to be, that will be the access.
Okay. I just wasn't sure if this was an interim thing or a permanent thing.
It is not necessarily interim, but Councilman Chapdos, there is a possibility when Bolin Road goes through, which is a much more theoretical possibility. It could swoop down. It could follow a bunch of alignments. If it follows the alignment of the USA Canal on the south side, there is a decent access in the middle of Tortosa, and if the HOA or the developers or the development group or any of the entities wanted to realign an access at that point, it would make the emergency access, the temporary emergency access unnecessary. So there is, at least similar to a temporary easement, there is a basis for which it could be eliminated, but barring some other emergency access coming through, I think the intent is that it will stay there.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on this item? Seeing none, can I have a motion, please? Have a motion. Is there a second? Motion and second. With that, let's move to roll call, please.
Councilwoman Gussie?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Chapdos?
Yes.
Councilmember Wade?
Yes.
Councilmember Manfredi?
Yes.
Mayor Price?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you very much. Congratulations to all parties involved, and thank you for sticking it out with all your hard work. Appreciate it. That takes us to item 10.6. The Mayor and City Council shall discuss possible take action on approving the purchase request issuance to Midway Chevrolet for 2017 Chevrolet Silverado Crew Cab color white. The vehicle will be utilized by the Information Technology Department. Go ahead.
Honorable Mayor
Gary.
and City Council, in the fiscal 2017 budget, we were allocated $20,000 to purchase a vehicle for use by the IT department. as you can see by the attached quote, the number came up a fair bit short. Rather than roll the funds over into fiscal 2018 and then request additional funds for the purchase, city manager suggested that we use contingency funds and purchase the vehicle this fiscal year. So that's the purpose of this request.
Okay. Questions, council, on this item? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve, please?
Move to approve.
So there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. And that takes us to item 10.7. The mayor and city council shall hear and possibly take action to determine the method of management for the Maricopa Family Advocacy Center. This is for discussion and action. We have a few items of folks here that want to talk on this. So I guess, Chief Stahl, will you be presenting this particular item? Do you want to come up and speak first, or would you rather have folks come up and speak first and you follow them? What would be your preference? Okay. With that, we will go to the speaker cards. I have several, so I would ask that you keep your comments short. We do want to hear from you, but again, I have a lot to get to, so I want to make sure everybody gets heard. First and foremost, I'd like to invite up Priscilla.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thanks for letting me come up tonight. I'm here to lend my support for the Family Advocacy Center, and I'm going to do so because I've spent my entire career as a social worker working with those who are at risk. My first job out of the gate from college was at a residential treatment center, and after my tours and my trainings and my background check, they said, now you get to read the files. And I read, I got through 4 of them. I went into my director's office and I said, I've made a big mistake. I've just spent $60,000 on a degree I don't think I can use. These are making me sick. And she says, the day that they don't make you sick is the day you need to leave. The Family Advocacy Center is not being asked of you guys to help families come together and read brochures about sunscreen. It's here to collect evidence against people who have been violated in some of the worst ways. Sorry, I'm still in the business. These are women in our community who have had their throats crushed by the men who are supposed to take care of them. They are the little girls whose vaginas were violated by vile men who stuck their fingers in them and inserted themselves in places they shouldn't go. They are asking for a place to collect evidence to help fight this. The law enforcement here in our city wants to fight evil that is in your community. And I know there's a concern about when the money comes out. They've raised a lot of private funds. It's quite impressive. I run my own nonprofit. I wish I could do that. Whoever's done that's amazing. But when the money runs out, what do? If you can only fight evil in your community for 2 years, that's it. You fight it for 2 years and then you outsource it back to Eloy. That's what I have to say. Sorry, it's short.
It's perfect, Priscilla. Thank you. Jessica Nicely, did I say that right? Jessica, come on up.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, for allowing me to speak. My name is Jessica Nicely. I'm the CEO and founder of Winged Hope Family Advocacy Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit. While I serve daily as an advocate for victims of violence here in Arizona, I actually grew up in Virginia. In Virginia, the very first Family Advocacy Center opened in 1998, the same year my daddy killed himself. Had someone intervened in my childhood, and had there been an advocacy center before 1998, I may have known a very different childhood. And had there been a family or child advocacy center in my town before 1998, I may not have had to know what I did know growing up in a house rife with violence. But because no one intervened and there was no advocacy center, here are some things I did know growing up. I knew what opium smelled like because my daddy would have opium drug parties in our den while I was sequestered in my room until his friends went home. I knew what it was like to come home from school and see my stepmom with rug burns on her face because my daddy had literally dragged her around the house. I knew what it was like to feel terrified in your own home, knowing that at any moment, sometimes for no reason at all, just because you came into the room in a moment he was feeling enraged, you could be shouted at, shoved, slapped, hit, or worse than all of that for me, ignored like you didn't exist at all for sometimes days at a time. I knew what it was like to come home and see the chain lock broken on my front door, which was my clue that my daddy had broken in again to beat up my stepmom. I knew how to shoot a gun because my daddy made us learn how in the basement where he would have target practice when he was feeling angry or frustrated, which was pretty much all the time. I knew what it was like to watch my daddy hit his wife with a closed fist, and in fact, I often stood between them to try to stop her from being hit. I knew what it was like to go to children of alcoholic groups in high school and sit in a small circle of people, share our deepest secrets and shame, and then walk the halls and pretend I didn't know them. And I knew what it was like to have my father succeed with his constant threat to end his life, and I learned to live with the stigma and guilt attached with being a survivor of suicide. So I've known sadness, I've known pain, I've known fear, and what an amazing gift it would have been if someone had stood up for me and my sister and my stepmom. But that's not how my story played out. Instead, I did suffer, but as a result of that suffering, I'm able to bring out hope and healing for victims today. And I'm able to stand here in front of you and ask you to do whatever it takes to ensure that the victims of violence in the city of Maricopa have the best services possible. And when someone intervenes for these victims, they have a family advocacy center to go to where they can receive the best of the best care from the best of the best teams. Winged Hope will help in any way we can. That being said, as a nonprofit owner, and after spending 5 years studying and serving and working with all the FACs around the state of Arizona, I would not advise that the FAC be run by the nonprofit model. And I can take any questions now, and I thank you guys for hearing my story, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jessica. Did you have any questions, Council? Jessica, at this time? Yes, Councilmember Chapados.
Jessica, could you elaborate on that position a little bit? What would be the disadvantages to having a nonprofit run it from your perspective?
Well, a lot of the family advocacy centers that I visit that are run by the nonprofit model simply run out of funds. When finances are short in cities, the first place they stop giving is to nonprofits. And so, and oftentimes too, nonprofits run things through different grants. When those grants run out or they're not run properly, then it loses its efficacy. And also when I visit the nonprofit run models, when you walk in, it's more of a kind of like your first apartment sort of feel, like your aunt's couch and your friend's chair, and it's just not as comforting for the victims. Whereas when it's run by the government agencies, they have more funds, and then they're able to partner with nonprofits and other agencies to make it more effective, and they're just better in terms of providing the services for the victims.
So in your experience and with the fundraising perspective that you bring to the table, what do you see as the main advantage for this the management style that is being suggested for us, a government run with stakeholders and partners?
That's just the way that I've seen it work the best. We work really closely right now with all the FACs around the state of Arizona. We've been working with, for example, the Mesa Family Advocacy Center, and have gone in 3 separate times since 2013 when we started to help them renovate their victim interview rooms, to help them renovate their medical exam suite, the lobby. And then they have other nonprofit agencies that come in and help them with other things when their victims come in and have certain needs, like they need diapers, or they need formula for the baby, or different things that they need. We are able to provide those. So I just really feel like the FAC model is based on collaboration and working together. And so that's really, I feel like, the best way to go. And again, running a nonprofit and knowing how difficult it is to raise money and fundraise, even we only run by collaborating with other agencies and partnering with other people. The problems that we're solving through FACs, sex trafficking, violent sexual abuse, domestic violence, can't be run by one entity alone. It has to be a collaborative effort, which is why the FAC model works. And so that's why I feel like it really would be more beneficial for it to be run that way.
With your focus on the fundraising aspect of it, am I correct in assuming that a lot of what you're able to offer and bring to the table would be gift in kind and possibly more supplies and materials oriented as opposed to funds?
Correct. We can absolutely hold fundraisers and raise some funds, but a lot of what we do is offer manpower and, again, renovate the spaces. So I know that the space that you all are looking at is an old home. So we can come in, we can tear down walls, we can build walls. I have a team of volunteers. I have a bunch of retired contractors who come in. I actually have helped build a wall, I'm excited to say. And so we can come in and do those kinds of things for far less money. Like I know at Mesa, they were looking at doing a project that was going to cost about $150,000, and we were able to help them do it for literally about $10,000. So we can come in and do things like that and do big projects, and we certainly can hold fundraisers on behalf of the FAC. But again, in my experience and looking at the different models and studying them for so long, going the nonprofit sole route just isn't the way to go.
One of the things with my experience, and I'm sure my fellow council members have their perspectives, but one of the things we constantly hear about is the lack of brick and mortar services. We have access to things, but not necessarily here. Would you speak to the importance and the value of networking and resources and what you guys bring to the table in that regard?
Absolutely. I was just talking with some of my colleagues today. I feel like some of the PDs have me on speed dial and give out my number like it's candy. And so, and part of the reason is because we fill a void. I feel like there's a lot of nonprofits that are run solely on grants, and we run it a different way, so we're able to fill gaps and do things that maybe you can't. If this gets run by the city, there's going to be a lot of rules. And so we can do things that maybe you all can't. We can fill gaps that you can't. But we literally, Winged Hope, only run through collaboration. On my way here, a victim that was referred to us by Gilbert PD called me. And again, things like that only happen. We're only able to help victims like that because of collaboration, because of networking. And so having, again, worked with all the FACs around the state for so many years and having close relationships, I'm happy to help bring those relationships here, bring those expertise, and again, bring any of the knowledge that I have just from doing this and working so long to this project.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Brown.
Through your activity, do you relate at all to the Pinal County Victims Compensation Board?
Are we related to that?
Do you relate at all to them? Because they serve people who have been victims of rape, child abuse, those kinds of things.
The victim advocates through Pinal County, yes. And actually, we have even partnered with some of them. I know we've worked with the sex trafficking unit through Pinal County and have collaborated on services for victims through them as well.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
thank you very much for coming forward to present today. I appreciate it. I have a question in reference to if the nonprofit reviewing model in which we will be able to come to terms on this evening, will that organization still receive the same level of support from your group?
I'm sorry, I heard part of it.
Can you repeat that? It kind of muffled out there.
Basically, I'm asking if the nonprofit model is the only model that we can come to terms with this evening, will the advocacy center receive the same level of support from you as if it was in the other process?
Of course. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions with Ms. Jessica?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much
Appreciate
for
it.
your time. Thank you.
Pinal County Attorney, Mr. Volkmer.
Mr. Mayor, council members, first I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and address you. I'm addressing you here today as the county attorney and to express my unequivocal support for a family advocacy center in Maricopa. Let me explain why to you. Right now, we have, and I say we, my office runs 2 different family advocacy centers in the county. We have one located in Santan Valley and one located in Eloy. Between the 2 facilities, we have nearly 800 interviews that we performed within the last year. I will tell you that a sobering factor of that is when the advocacy centers develop in a community, the amount of people that actually come and report and have those services performed and the interviews done skyrocket. If we look at just the number, 800, you guys are roughly 1/8 of the population of our county. It means about 100 cases come out of here, and that number is only going to increase. And that is the case for all FACs across the state. Another question that had been asked is what, I guess, services or what collaboration is our office going to have with this FAC? There are a couple different things that our office does provide. Statutorily, we are required to pay for the actual medical portion of the examinations. The FAC does not only sexual assaults, but physical and DV type cases, men, women, boys, girls, it doesn't matter. Pursuant to statute, we have to actually pay for the medical portion of that. Additionally, my office, starting July 1st, will have 3 full-time forensic interviewers. And the forensic interviewers are the specially trained individuals who have gone through certification, and they're taught not to lead children and not to taint various investigations. We will be able to provide backup. We can't be the primary necessarily, but in the event that either the forensic interviewer assigned to this FAC or Chief Stahl and his officers are not capable, we will be able to provide that. And then one of the most important things we also provide is MDT staffing. And what MDT is multi-team decision making, I apologize. What it essentially is it's a process to make sure that we get better at our jobs. So typically at least once a month there is a case where we sit down and we specifically review it. When I say we, I include the county attorney's office, prosecutors, we include our FAC, forensic interviewer, our child advocacy, our victim advocate. We also include our detectives and police officers to find out what we did well and what we can do better. And because of our role in that, we would be more than willing and hopefully permitted to participate in that, because as the old saying goes, steel sharpens steel. So somebody that's been there and knows that can help collectively make this the best possible effort. I will briefly address the question I anticipate, and that is, what's the best model? At the end of the day, I don't care, and I don't mean that to be dismissive. You need the FAC. That's the primary goal. I will tell you that in a perfect world, the government-ran model is preferential, and the reason I say that is there is tighter controls over not only the finances, but actually the quality of services. But I will tell you that if it's between not having one or having a nonprofit, it is, in my opinion, vital that not only Maricopa, but the western portion of our community, and when I say our community, our county, have the service. I think what you'll ultimately see is, I believe your city manager mentioned that it is sort of regional. I think you're going to see that it's not just people in Maricopa. I believe you'll see people from the various tribal nations, Ak-Chin and Gila River. You may see people from the western side of Casa Grande, from Stanfield and other areas. It's not going to be here. But as I told my board, this isn't a financial return. You're not getting money back. That if you look at just the numbers, it doesn't make sense. But sometimes we have to go beyond the numbers to make sure that we're providing the appropriate service for the most vulnerable in our community. And based on that concept, I believe it's absolutely vital that you do support ultimately an FAC in this community. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions that any of the council may have.
Any questions at this time? Yes, Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Volkmer. My biggest concern, if you were going to go back and watch the previous conversation, is I feel that the model has been set that this is a county-run operation, and I don't see that it benefits the city of Maricopa to take on that risk and that burden when it's already been a precedence that it's a county-operated facility. So what is the direction that the county is taking, or in particular, I think they both are run out of your office is taking in order to make this happen? Why are you standing here in front of us asking us to open it, and your office is not there yet? Maybe poorly worded, but you understand what I'm trying to say.
Mr. Mayor, Council Member Smith, if I had my choice and money were not an issue, each community would have its own FAC. I make no bones about that. Each and every community would benefit from this. Our problem is it's going to cost us approximately another $420,000 for us to open it. When I believe I actually heard some of the arguments and read the newspaper, and I actually sat down with my director of the FAC, Dr. Spears, who's present, and said, what would this cost if our county were to open one? An additional facility, and that was the number that was arrived at when we figure all the additional staff and everything else. I will tell you the county-run model is maybe not the best, but it's what we have. To my knowledge, I believe there are 18 FACs currently in the state of Arizona. I believe we have the only 2 county-ran facilities. All other facilities are not ran by the county. Not that it's necessarily a terrible idea to do it, but that is unique, and that was both of those created by, I believe it was former County Attorney Carter Olson, who initiated the one in Eloy, and then my predecessor, Mr. Voiles, created the one in Santan Valley, and that was a necessity. What were happening is we were having cases that we essentially had women and children that were not being interviewed, and they were refusing to drive to Eloy. They were refusing to drive places where essentially he was able to find funding to say, okay, I'm drawing a line in the sand and I'm creating this. We don't have those finances, otherwise I would be here saying give it to us. Just the reality is, if you rely on us, Mr. Mayor, the Honorable Mayor indicated lucid in those, we're going to have to wait till those funds come in before we can do a major project like that. And my concern is if we wait 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, that's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years of young children and women and men and boys who are not getting the services they need. And the issue is that they just simply don't come forward. If you tell a mother that she has to drive her child to Phoenix or she has to drive her child to Eloy, a lot of them, and it's hard to understand, but they just refuse to go take them to those facilities. And when they refuse to go to those facilities, my office then can't prosecute. I know I went on a tangent and I apologize.
Well, that's okay. I think what doesn't make sense to me is why, if the scenario changes that it's not Maricopa operated, it's county operated, does this entire scenario not just transfer over to you? And if it's affordable for us because of all of the donations that have been provided, the Auction grant, the possible Gila River grant, if it's affordable to us because we don't have money either, how can that not just transfer directly to you and for the county to take ownership of it? Because it is a regional problem, and we want to solve the problem on the west side. We want these families to have a place to go. But to me, it's very much a precedence that's already been set. It's a regional issue. It belongs more in the county. And I don't understand why the same pieces can't be picked up and put over under the county, and why you wouldn't be able to operate it under the same realm that we're being asked to operate it with the funds that have been donated. In the same location.
Honorable Mayor, Council Member Smith, it is the opening of your Family Advocacy Center is anticipated to cost us approximately, when I say us, the county and specifically my office, an additional $100,000 to $120,000. And that is simply the cost of the medical examinations. So assuming those additional costs is what makes it cost prohibitive, because for this city, it may cost you, and again, I don't have the numbers in front of me and I apologize, but if it's $80,000 that the city has to pay, for an example, we're already paying that 100, so it's really $180,000 to $200,000 to us, and what it's happening is it's pushing it over the viability standard for us and for my ability to go to my board and to convince them to give me money to have that. Because again, we don't have any choice. If this opens, we have to pay the money, and I will tell you my office will find a way to pay for those services. But that's the reason, because we already have $100,000 plus of building costs that we can't get rid of.
Yeah, I was looking at the numbers earlier, and I sent the chief some questions, and when he gets up, we'll be able to ask him some additional questions. But my understanding was that the city's portion of it was only going to be $10,000, and I could be under the wrong impression based on the questions and answers that I received. And I would imagine that the city of Maricopa would continue to be able to fund that $10K. I'm not sure at this point, but I just don't see anything stopping it from being county operated and with the funds that you've designated aside. And I appreciate your comments, because you're stating some very, very good points that apply to the county as well as the city. If all funding falls through in terms of donation, it puts the burden on the city, just as you indicated. If all funding falls through, it puts the burden on the county. And I appreciate your honesty in saying that the county is not at a point where it can carry that load, and my concern is that the city is not at a point where we can carry that load if that funding falls through. So I appreciate your honesty, and I appreciate you sharing that with the public, because it's a reality of finances, in essence, that we're both faced with in terms of who takes ownership of this. So I'm sure we'll get some more questions and answers from the chief in regards to why it can't just transfer over under the same model as what's being asked of the city over to the county. But I appreciate your honesty. Thank you.
Councilmember Chapados.
Mr. Volkmer, thank you so much for being here. My question is kind of piggybacking on something you started. With the trauma that the victims experience, and also the caregivers and their extended family members, to have to wait if there's a delay in service, if there's additional trauma during the trip, how does that impact your ability to prosecute and then your conviction rate? How many people do you have, let's say, separate from, okay, I'm not going to put myself through that or my child through that, so case closed? versus those that decide to pursue prosecution but then just get overwhelmed by the process and say, I can't do this anymore, I'm out?
Honorable Mayor, Council Member Chapados, I don't have that number in front of me. I wish I could tell you. It's very difficult to get those type of numbers because typically in that particular scenario that you're describing, Chief Stahl and the Maricopa PD would not submit that to my office. If we don't have a good forensic interview, if we don't have any information that corroborates what the victim is alleging, then my office can't proceed forward. What I think is important for the community to understand on these type of cases, we don't bring these cases unless we are confident that we have the right person and we're going to be able to secure a conviction for two reasons. One, to put a child or a woman or a man through a trial where they relive the most harrowing and awful experience that they've ever had to get no resolution is re-traumatizing that victim once again, and we were very careful not to do that. And additionally, we have a responsibility to the rights of the accused. And if we're not confident this person did this, we are not going to bring these type of charges. So oftentimes law enforcement, if they don't have the case there, they don't submit it to us. So it's hard for me to give you that number. That is probably an issue better addressed by Chief Stahl, perhaps Sheriff Lamb, Chief McCory, and some of our law enforcement officials, because that usually doesn't get to us.
Okay. But in your experience as the county attorney at the prosecutorial level, would you say that if we were, as a city, able to offer a family advocacy center using the collaboration partnership that's been proposed, do you see that as being successful? Do you see that as possibly increasing reporting as well as being able to make arrests, prosecute, and actually reduce the trauma and the incidents that are reported?
Honorable Mayor, Council Member Chapados, unequivocally yes. Every time an FAC opens, you see that the numbers increase. And it's important to realize that, again, this isn't just law enforcement that will use the FAC. Child Protective, well, now it's the Department of Child Safety, also uses a facility for suspected physical abuse and those type of things, because again, sometimes it's important to know if this is true. You may have a child that comes through and makes a comment to a teacher, for example. We want to know if this is legitimate, because we don't want to take a child and remove that child from the parent if this is an upset child. So the FAC, it goes both ways. It goes to protect parents from and these potential offenders from unmeritorious claims, and then it also makes sure we protect the children. But yes, this will be a benefit, and I can tell you that because of not only my experience as a prosecutor, but I represented children. Prior to my taking office, about 50% of my work was actually representing children, and typically they were children that were either abused or were in homes where DCS had to remove them. And I can unequivocally tell you that that information, ultimately in getting resources and getting the appropriate services in place to treat these children and women and victims, it's invaluable. And there's no way that we won't see an increase. And I can only tell you that based on the numbers that we see. I can tell you when the FAC in Santan opened up, we literally doubled the number of cases that we had coming through in the county. We went from about 400 to nearly 800. Actually, I think it was 350 to nearly 800, so it more than doubled the number of cases. I don't know that we'll get as large of an increase here because the population isn't quite as big, but I would anticipate there would be a large spike in not only prosecutions, but also use from DCS and services being provided to the most vulnerable in our society.
Thank you.
County Attorney, can you talk just very, very quickly about the Eloy FAC? Is that a true FAC, or is it a child-only facility, or can you talk about that one a little bit, and then I have a follow-on question for you.
Honorable Mayor, absolutely. It is a true FAC, but the reality is the majority of our FAC work are for sex assault, a little bit of DV, not much, but mostly children. I will tell you that we are making an emphasis on trying to address issues for the elderly, in particular elder abuse. In fact, I am very happy to announce, I think it's the first time it's done publicly, that we have received a federal grant to further push that. So the idea of an FAC is not limited to children. Practically, that's normally where we'll start at, because again, nobody's ever going to complain about us servicing children, but we are looking to expand, and we are particularly targeting the elderly at this point, those that are susceptible to both physical and financial abuse.
Thank you. So I guess the question I have is regarding, kind of some territorialism, so to speak. I mean, it's not to say that, any one is you can only go there or somewhere else. You're looking for proximity, and that makes sense. But you said something earlier about, ideally, you'd have one in every community, right? Because now you have the best of proximity. But I think that, as a follow-on to what Councilmember Smith said, I think one of the challenges that we face here in that what is being asked of us is that while on one hand of this double-edged sword, it can be very easily dictated that, we are taking the lead, we're doing something nobody else has done in the county, and that is very admirable. But at the same time, we're the only one in the entire county that's being asked to bear that burden should something go wrong. And so while all these other communities are dealing with from a collaborative standpoint, we're the only ones on the hook. And I think that worries me ever so slightly. And as a follow-on, the other worry that I have to talk about, from a taxpayer perspective is that of what happens if other cities decide to open them? What if Casa Grande opens one? What if Arizona City has one? What if suddenly, all these other little locations decide to have one? And now, I guess it's kind of a twofold question. Does the county attorney's office then prohibit them from opening based on the fact that you are, fiscally responsible for providing those exams, by statute? And therefore you say, sorry, we can only have one in the Western Pinal County, we can only have one in Eastern Pinal County, we can only have one in Southern Pinal County. Is that how it's limited, or can all of them open tomorrow should they somehow get funding?
Mr. Mayor, Honorable Mayor, excuse me, there will be no prohibition, at least while I'm in office. We'll find a way to pay. What we're talking about is the most vulnerable in our society that are being taken advantage of. The reason that my preference is every community have one, because it's a lot easier to drive 10 or 15 minutes or 5 minutes or walk to it than it is to be put potentially in the back of a cruiser or with a stranger and driven to some faraway destination, particularly if it's a 5-year-old little girl or a 6-year-old little boy. So as far as my administration is concerned, we will put no limitations. In fact, we'll do everything we can to assist. If the city of Coolidge or the city of Florence or Superior or any other town were asking for the same thing Chief Stahl is asking for, I would be here supporting that because it's best for the residents of our community. I will agree with you that you are being asked to carry a bigger burden than perhaps other cities. I'll make no bones about that. But I will tell you, Yuma, for example, Mesa, and other cities are also taking on that burden. And it's for the betterment of our community members. And my hope is that your residents will appreciate that there are certain things that we need to pay for the betterment of our society. This is one of those things. If you're going to draw your line in the sand, you're going to die on a hill. This is the hill that you want to die on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other questions, Council, of Mr. Volkman? Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Yes, Councilmember Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Volkman. The approval authority, or assuming the approval authority for a county facility would be the Board of Supervisors. And I'm curious, is what efforts previously, before this discussion were taken, what efforts or what discussions were taken to have that approval authority move forward with doing a advocacy center here in Western Pennsylvania County?
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Wade, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage. I've only been in office for going on 6 months. I cannot tell you what happened prior to my taking office. I can tell you the personal discussions I've had is we have a couple, what I would characterize as hiccups with Santan Valley, and the directive impression that I've gotten from the board in my informal conversations is we need to take care of that first as a location before we can talk about anything else. So my focus since taking office has not been with seeing if we can open one here. I'm trying to address some other issues that currently exist. So I apologize.
I appreciate the honesty in that regard as well. It's no secret in the community that, for me, when we have a discussion about what's important for the community as opposed to how much money is going to cost, I always fall on the side of the community. And so when I hear us having discussions about dollars where you have the efforts of Chief Stahl, he's done a yeoman's job of going out there to secure financing for a facility there in Maricopa, and those taken advantage of because if you got what you needed in order to push forward on a legitimate and effective prosecution, then that's good enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? We're good to go. Thank you very much. We'll move to the next one. Dorian Townsend.
Honorable Mayor Price and City Council, my name is Dr. Dorian Townsend, and I serve as the Executive Director of Community Alliance Against Family Abuse, also known as CAFA. I want to express support for item 10.7 in the city management and implementation of the Maricopa Family Advocacy Center. CAFA serves survivors of domestic and sexual violence, including sex trafficking. While we're based in Apache Junction, we provide services in eastern Maricopa and Pinal counties, including crisis shelter, survivor advocacy, sexual assault advocacy, legal advocacy, support groups, empowerment sessions, outreach, community education, a crisis line, military sexual assault advocacy, and much more. In the last fiscal year, we've provided direct services to about 670 survivors, including 111 in crisis shelter. CAFA is the only general sexual assault advocacy agency in Pinal County, and when I say general, what that means is we work with all victims of all ages, regardless of if they decide to pursue prosecution and regardless of the recency of the incident. Almost 45% of women and over 22% of men in the U.S. will experience sexual violence in their lives. In CAFA's service area, that amounts to roughly 320,000 adults experiencing sexual violence during their lifetimes. And right here in the city of Maricopa, that's approximately 10,600 adults who will experience sexual violence. CAFA is elated to become a partner for the City of Maricopa Family Advocacy Center, and we fully support the project as an opportunity to serve victims in the Maricopa community with full service holistic care. We're dedicated to funding and operating a satellite office through the City of Maricopa FAC and working collaboratively with other FAC agencies, including Dignity Health, Pinal County Attorney's Office, and the Police Department, as well as referral agencies such as Against Abuse and CARA. We thank you for leading the way on this, and we hope that you will move forward with the management of the FAC and make City of Maricopa a true thought leader for victim services in our state.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ms. Townsend? Yes, Councilwoman Gussie.
You had mentioned that you do outreach for all victims. On just the other day, I was listening to NPR about the undocumented illegal aliens, whatever you want to call them, immigrants, in our communities that are going and not reporting crimes such as described today because they are illegal or undocumented. So when you say you do this outreach, are you reaching out to those individuals in communities within Pinal County or wherever it is that you work that have become victims of domestic violence or whatever it is?
Yes, we deliberately target multiple underserved populations, including people who are undocumented. We work very closely with multiple tribal nations and with other communities and ethnicities who are less ready to pursue prosecution or to trust law enforcement. And on top of that, we actually do work very closely with 4 different law enforcement departments. So we try to make sure that all of the bases are covered, that anybody who may be experiencing sexual violence or domestic violence or sex trafficking has a place to come to, and that they receive the specific support that they identify as their need. Not everyone is ready to pursue certain means, but we are there to help them walk through that path, to follow best practices within trauma-informed care and make sure that they deal with their trauma in their own unique, culturally responsive way.
And a follow-up question, as far as your involvement here in Maricopa, what would that entail? You know, specific hours, or how does that work?
Yeah, so currently we actually already have a sexual violence services manager who provides advocacy services throughout the entire county and does work with victims of sexual violence here in Maricopa. Part of what this would allow us to do is, quite frankly, Pinal County is the size of Connecticut. It's difficult to cause sometimes, and when it is an immediate incident of sexual violence and when someone is reaching out for support, any extra barrier, such as a time barrier or a barrier geographically, will make it that much harder for them to seek support. And so what we are committing to doing, and we're not a huge agency, we like to say we're the little agency that could. We manage to serve lots of people through community partnerships. But we're committing to paying $5,000 a year to operate an office space at the Maricopa FAC so that we do have a person there. It would start out as office hours, but we're actually pursuing funding from multiple sources to have someone who is consistently at the Maricopa FAC to specifically serve victims in Maricopa who come to the FAC and need those general advocacy services.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Dr. Townsend? Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up is Kathleen Dowler. Kathleen? And Amanda Kendall, you're on deck.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council.
Would you speak into that microphone? So
Thank you
very
for
much.
this
Appreciate
opportunity
it.
for me to speak. I'm Kathleen Dowler, Director of Community Integration for Dignity Health East Valley, Chandler Regional, and Mercy Gilbert's Medical Center. I have been a member of the steering committee for at least a couple of years, and Dignity Health really feels quite a bit of alignment with the Family Advocacy Center as it relates to our mission of providing quality access to care, advocacy for our disenfranchised population, and partnership with the community to help address health needs of the community. And this Family Advocacy Center certainly does all of those. Dignity Health also has, through our Community Health Needs Assessment, health priorities that help us in identifying the health issues that we will help address in the community. The Family Advocacy Center has alignment with several of those identified needs, which include access to care, mental health, behavioral health, and injury prevention. So again, a great alignment to work with the City of Maricopa to address the needs of this population. Dignity Health is also committed to support for the project financially through by providing $50,000 over 5 years to help support this project and offer other opportunities for investment as well through our community grants program where the center can apply for those funding as well. The Family Advocacy Center is aligned with Dignity Health in our core philosophy that offers human kindness through compassionate services for those in the community that are victims of crises and very horrible, horrific circumstances such as rape, domestic violence, suicide, strangulations. So in the case of the Family Advocacy Center, at the end of the day, the core values of humanity are being addressed for your community. For those often that many of the people in your community aren't even aware that these crises are occurring, or certainly to the degree that they are occurring. And so this provides an opportunity to provide a model of care that maybe it doesn't get the recognition that many other entities of service do, but is significant and significantly important from a humane perspective. So I thank you for your willingness to consider this project, not just because it's come to you from many partners and because it's a recognized need in the community, but for the humanity involved in caring for those that are most disenfranchised and lacking the ability to reach out. And by you having something in your community with the collaborative partners to help provide that service and sustain it is really something special and to be proud of. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. And Amanda Kendall.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, for allowing me to speak. I'm Amanda Kendall. I'm the program manager for the Department of Child Safety here in Pinal County. Was not intending to speak tonight. However, I am in support of the FAC and the City of Maricopa for a lot of reasons. My career with the department has been largely in Pinal County. Spent many years working out of the FAC in Eloy. And the county of Pinal is growing, like crazy. We all know that. The city of Maricopa also, you guys know better than I do that it's growing. The fact of the matter is, our most vulnerable population, the children that we serve, need to have access to appropriate care, appropriate resources. And one of the big things that we can do for our children is allowing them to have FACs, which allows the department specifically to conduct what we call joint investigations with, in this case, Maricopa PD or Pinal County Sheriff or whichever it may be. It does allow for better prosecution. It allows for us to ensure the safety of our children and then ensure that they have the safety and the trauma-informed care that they need so they grow up to be healthy and productive adults. I have done this for the better part of 10 years. And again, the vast majority of my experience is in investigations of the very nasty, horrible cases that we see at family advocacy centers. I see much better results for our children and for our non-offending parents when they have the resources at an FAC. So for those reasons, I am very much in support of this. The FAC will definitely have the partnership of my department. Bar none, we have joint collaborations with Pinal County attorneys and the other FACs, and I really look forward to the opportunity to working more closely with the City of Maricopa in this capacity.
Any questions? Thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate it. That concludes our speaker cards on that item, so we'll invite Chief Stahl to come on up.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of council, and guests. First off, I'd like to thank County Attorney Volkmer for taking out his time tonight. I know he's a busy man, and Dr. Boychuk, thank you, or I'm sorry, Dr. Spears. I used to work with her when she was Dr. Boychuk at the Mesa Center, so I always mess that up. From Dignity Health, I still remember tricking you the first time coming here. The purpose was to get our hospital here. So I tricked her into coming, and we got her to do the planning session for the needs of the community, and then she became very involved in this project. So I guess tricks do work every now and again. I also would like to thank the speakers, and I really don't think that I need to talk to any of you or any of the audience about the importance of an advocacy center in the city of Maricopa. It was asked some time back, why is this a community? Is this community's responsibility, and why is this community's responsibility? Thought long and hard about that statement or that question, and my response is, if not us, who? We are the elected leaders and directors of our community. It is our job to keep our people safe. That is all I'm asking us to do. And again, I think everybody's in agreement. An advocacy center is absolutely needed here. So I know I'm preaching to the choir. One of the things that I do want to kind of address with County Attorney Volkmer's statement, as well as a couple questions that were outstanding. This is people throw the term around advocacy quite loosely. This is a family center its primary responsibility is to provide a multidisciplinary approach to investigating the most horrific crimes there are in the country. The only thing more serious on any statute in any state in the United States is homicide. That's the only thing more serious than a child crime. So we're talking about the most serious of seriousness. How do you put a price tag on that? I don't know how you do. I can't justify it. If you want to become number one in the state of Arizona, the number one safest city in the state of Arizona, we need to reduce our domestic violence crimes. 540 times from 2015 to date, 540 times we've taken domestic violence victims to advocacy centers for further follow-up. 540 times. 40% of our calls are domestic violence. You want to reduce our city to the safest? Get that down to what the norms are, which is 20% or less. That is our goal, to keep our community members safe. So it is an advocacy center because many of our partners provide advocacy for the long term. Our job, I'm a police officer, I've been a police officer for over 30 years. I want an investigation, I want it done per the protocol, I want all the evidence collected properly so that a defense attorney, and I don't speak badly of defense attorneys, but I do not want a defense attorney to have a defense argument against our most vulnerable. That's my job as a police officer, to get the best team together to collect all of the evidence, whether it's DNA or whether it's a forensic interview, and provide that. And I think County Attorney Volkmer is being a little modest in one of the things that they also do is they provide training to all of our police officers in forensic interviews at often no cost to the agencies. So they do contribute a whole lot that maybe you can't put a price tag on it, but I put a price tag on it because that is stuff that costs a lot of money if you send somebody out of state to attend those trainings. Councilwoman Smith, to address the question, I think the thing that, I'm going to try to answer this as best I possibly can. Why can't the county take on this advocacy center as well? They have a staff to pay for. I don't. Casa Grande provides their own staff. Pinal County Sheriff's Office provides their own staff. Any other agency that comes, that's on this list, provides their own staff. I don't have to hire a director, I don't have to hire staff to do forensic interviews or be there for counseling sessions or anything. This is operated but contributed to by each agency based on how they use the advocacy center. I don't have to pay for a staff. That's easily $200,000 that we don't have to pay for. One of the biggest things I do want to reiterate to you, and I will go very quickly, the Family Justice Center Alliance, it's a federal organization, talks about 4 different ways to manage advocacy centers in the country. And they readily acknowledge the 2 most common ones are public hosted and nonprofit. The concerns I'm hearing appear to be sustainability for the future. This Federal Bureau says the #1 advantage, the top advantage for public agency hosted models is sustainability. The #1 advantage, increased sustainability. I will reiterate to you what I reiterated last time. For 5 years, I am not asking for 1 cent from this elected body. I have, through Mary Witkowski's hard work, I have to commend her. Through her hard work, we've already received nearly $400,000 worth of funding. And we have $600,000 waiting in the wings. I'm not asking for a penny. And if all of our partners back out, I have asset forfeiture funding enough sitting there waiting to sustain us for 5 years to keep my promise to you. I will not ask for a penny. With that, I open it to questions.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Manfredi.
Chief, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for talking today. I had a couple questions, and they were simple ones. Worst case scenario next year, how much are you going to ask us for?
0.
Year after that?
0.
Year after that?
0.
And the year after that?
0.
Okay. there's no discussion on my side. It really isn't. I mean, we're going to have a discussion about it. I know we are. But I've been part of many 501c3s and nonprofits, and I've seen them fall apart. I've had 501c3 nonprofit folks that run nonprofits stand right here and tell me they don't want it run by a nonprofit. That tells me something also. When I look at it, I see it as a simple decision. If we don't lead, it won't get done, and nothing against our county attorney. He just doesn't have the funds for it. Nothing against our county. They don't have the money for it. We might beg them and ask them, and eventually, maybe 10 years from now, we'll get one, but that's 1,000 people that won't get the services they need in those 5-10 years for me. We also talk about, people are going to mention money and sustainability and things like that. When I look at it, if we have over, since 2005, 500 people that have had to go to Eloy, Queen Creek.
2015.
2015, sorry, I apologize. 500 of them that have had to go to Eloy, Casa Grande, Maricopa County, wherever we've taken them. I'm pretty sure the staff we had to send with them cost us a lot of money in overtime, between the hours they drove there, the hours they sat in the car, the hours they sat in the advocacy center, wherever they were. That's money that we're going to save. If money that we have coming in is coming in through the hard work of Mary and everyone else involved, then for me, again, I don't see the discussion. I know that we're going to talk about 10.8, which is the approval, right? And right now we're discussing 10.7. For me, 10.7 is simple. I believe that it should be run by us. It should be funded by us. If we can't come up with the money, my next question was, would you be willing to use your forfeiture money for it? And you already answered that question. I don't see why we're even having a discussion about whether it's going to be run by a nonprofit or whether it's going to be run by you. I trust you, and I believe 100%. I would agree. I mean, I would say that I'd make a motion, but I'm not going to. But I wish I could make a motion right now to approve it, run by us, run by our city, because I believe we have to put our city and our residents first. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Chapados.
Chief, thank you so much for the work and the research you did. In a prior life, I was the person on the other side of that victim. You can't imagine what those people go through, and it is an emotional thing, so I apologize. But I also want to recognize Mary Witkowski. Not only did she do this well, she did it in 3 months. That is amazing. This is the first time since I've been involved with the city that I can remember somebody bringing forth a project where they ask for no money. You've got us funded for 5 years. You've got partners that you vetted, that you have established relationships for. You've done this personally in the city of Mesa in a former jurisdiction that you work for. So, I mean, everything is falling in place. This is like the 347 project for victims. The stars have aligned. The funding is in place. It's sustainable for 5 years without us touching a dime. And I know, because that lady, what she can do in 3 months, give her another 6 months, and I guarantee you we won't even be worried about funding. But there's a couple other folks, and there's 2 of them here tonight that we have to recognize. You talk about the services that we provide to the victims and the support that we got. Those 2 people in the gray shirts, they represent the investment and the community dedication. I mean, I know Libby personally. I've talked to her. She is a former Volunteer of the Year recipient. It doesn't matter what time of the day or night it is. If her phone rings, same with Barry. Where do you need me? You can't put a price on that. And I just want to support what Councilmember Wade said earlier and what Councilmember Manfredi said. This is about the victims. If we lose sight of that, all the things that Maricopa is praised for take a step down. I will second your motion whenever you're ready to make it. Thank you.
Other councilman, Councilmember Gussie.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. I mean, it means a lot to everyone, I believe. This, I do believe it should be city-ran. This is a no-brainer. It's a 5-year. You already have it. All the collaboration is evident here in this room, and it's the right thing to do. At the end of the day, that's why we were elected, and that's why we're making these decisions. But thank you for everyone for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I want to say that I appreciate the comments about it being a no-brainer on the emotional side. I completely agree with that. But it's not necessarily such a simple no-brainer just because we say we have funding at this point. It is taking on a risk, and to be emotional about it and say it's a no-brainer without saying, oh, there's no risk, and pushing aside the risk is concerning to me. I bring up, and I wish I could quote exactly, one of the speakers, Jessica, said the reason it shouldn't be a nonprofit is because nonprofit funding ends instantaneously without any warning. That's why it shouldn't be a nonprofit. Well, all of our funding is coming from nonprofits. And so if it can end so instantly, that then takes the risk and puts it on the city. Now, I appreciate the fact that the chief is willing, in that case, for the next 5 years, to use his RICO funds, and that speaks loudly to me. So I want the people in present to know and understand that that speaks loudly to me. But I want everyone to realize it is a risk in the long run in regards to the fact that even one of our speakers says nonprofit funding falls off without any warning whatsoever, and then it becomes our burden, which, as the county attorney said, could be a $400,000, $500,000 total burden as this thing grows. That's huge. But I do appreciate the chief mentioning the fact that he's willing at this point for the next 5 years to use his RICO funds. When I talk about taking this model and picking it up and giving it to the county because it's a regional problem, I'm talking about not following the model that currently exists. I don't understand why we can't think out of the box and pick up the model that you've laid out perfectly, but it's owned, and the risk is owned by the county since it's a regional service. And to me, I think that that's thinking out of the box and saying it can operate exactly as you said, no director, a criminal investigator, lieutenant running it as needed, operating the exact same way, thinking out of the box. But it's actually taken on by the county attorney, as are the other elements that we currently have within our county. But I don't want to argue that.
Councilwoman
when
Smith,
yes.
if I might add, we certainly can talk to the county attorney during this 5-year period to see if that would be an option as we go, because most of our funding is federal grant funding, and it's our partners. It's Ak-Chin, it's Gila River, it's STOP grants through the federal government, it's VAWA grants, it's government grants that nonprofits don't qualify for, or often don't qualify for. But there's certainly nothing precludes us during this 5-year period. We have to work together to try to find sustainable funding options. And I welcome working with County Attorney Volkmer. He's been very good to work for and work with to make sure that we're not just stopping at 5 years, because and I know that's the fear, is what do we do in 5 years? How do we take something this good away from our residents? I get that. Don't want that to happen either, and that's why I promise we will continue to work together to look at sustainability for a long term in the future.
I appreciate that. That was actually one of the things later down on my list, that was how can we look at actually migrating this in the next 5 years as we understand it better, and does it really belong under the county? Is it becoming too much of a risk for a city to operate a regional service? Anyway, I appreciate that. When we talk, I just also wanted to mention, the comment was made that it's proven that a government-run entity is more sustainable. To me, that could be said for many different services that private companies do. So, and you're smiling, so you get that. I appreciate that.
I'm just quoting what they said, ma'am.
I know it, but I just had to argue back on that. So I think given that, I'll leave it at that. I just want people to understand it's easy to make an emotional decision and a no-brainer decision. But if we're really responsible leaders, we have to look at what does the future hold? What is the risk for us? It does appear as though we have a solution for the next 5 years with the RICO funds. And there's no chance that those RICO funds are going to be depleted.
I will ensure they're not.
And there's no chance that with all the discussion of RICO federally, that they'd be taken away from us?
Now, they're not going to change the language of what acceptable uses are for, RICO can be used for. What they have said is they're going to change the proof of when we're able to receive those funds, what that reasonable proof is going to be. Is it going to be a conviction before we get the money, or is it going to be just, charging? How far along the process is that going to be? But there's no talk of once you have the funding, here is what the reasonable standards or practices to be able to use that funding. And there has been no discussion of that whatsoever, if I'm not mistaken. And county attorney's been in many of those legislative floor meetings too.
All right, thank you. I hadn't gotten into the details of all the discussion federally at RICO. So a couple of my last concerns is the Criminal Investigation Division Lieutenant. That I read through the MOU or IGA, and that person who's assigned to that seems like they're taking on a lot of additional responsibility. So I'm concerned with what impact that has on their current job. How do they fit this, what seems to me to be an enormous additional task, into their current daily?
Mayor Price, Vice Mayor Brown, Councilwoman Smith, great question. That's why I thank you in advance for the 4th lieutenant in the budget this year. That is one of the primary responsibilities of the day shift lieutenant, is to make sure they are supervising the criminal investigations unit, specifically child crimes and things like that. So this will be able to let us take other projects that we would normally give to that lieutenant and give them to the other lieutenants, and let this person focus on all the day shift happenings plus the center. And they will always have me to fall back on, Mary to fall back on, the attorney staffing, all the other partners that are here as well. This isn't just going to be that lieutenant doing this. This is a team. Casa Grande has a voice at the table. Pinal County Sheriff's Office has a voice at the table. Pinal County Attorney's Office, DCS, all those people have a voice at the table and will be helping as well.
And then previously I had asked you about the location, the floodplain, the improvements.
Yes, ma'am.
How do we get around if the improvements are more than a certain value of the home? You understand that whole line of questioning. Could you give me some more detail now that you've had a chance to research that?
Yes, Mayor Price, Vice Mayor Brown, and Councilwoman Smith, we have met with Pinal County Floodplain. Josh Plum, Mary, and Pinal County all met together. Along with the owner, we have met with the owner. And there has been some mitigation already done. The building actually was built up a little bit above the floodplain. So for the most part, if the value of the reconstruction that we're doing inside the house is less than half of what the value of the house is, no mitigation needs to be done. Now, personally, I think we need to do some mitigation anyway, and probably have a retention area to store water on there for that 3-day period, which we intend to do anyway. But from what it looks like right now, they all looked at it. The foundation of the house is at the appropriate level, so there's very minimal that we'll have to do.
Okay, and any retention that you might have to do is within the budget that you've provided?
Yes, ma'am, and that's why during the first year, our $10,000 will be all for all those, the permits and the fees and all the other mitigation that needs to be done.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Councilwoman Chapados, then Councilmember Manfredi.
Thank you. I just want to once again apologize to everybody. There's certain issues that just trigger my buttons, and this happens to be one of them. But I also want to say that if you ever see me not get emotional about certain things, please have the good grace to tell me to get off of this dais. Part of what I think is important in serving the residents is sometimes bringing emotion to it. I'm perfectly capable of separating that and making a business decision. But I think emotion, we all express our emotions and our causes in different aspects. So, again, I apologize for the tears, but it's an emotional issue. Chief, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, and this is also a question for City Manager Rose, when you did your city manager's report, you advocated for the nonprofit model. Did I hear you correctly that you were recommending that Chief Stahl be the executive director or the head of the board for the first year at least?
Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, Councilmember Chapados, up under the nonprofit model, the mayor and council have broad discretion as to what that model would look like. And so where it would effectively still be a 501c3 type of organization, the mayor and council would be responsible, could be responsible for appointing the board of directors. And the chair for that board, is my recommendation, would be the chief of police. So that's the structure that I think would best fit both the community as well as not provide the expectation that this is simply going to be a service that is funded by Maricopa residents, because as everyone agrees to, it's a regional service that's being provided. My recommendation was based upon, if it is a regional service, then why shouldn't it be a regional community that is supporting it?
Okay, thank you. I guess in reading the proposed letter of agreement with the government model that's being suggested, Chief Stahl would have a position on the steering committee, and if I'm reading it correctly, for the first year you would be the chair of that committee. But after the first year, the committee itself could then elect its own chair, vice chair, whatever it needed. And did I interpret that correctly?
Mayor Price, Vice Mayor Brown, and Councilwoman Chapados, yes, that's how it's worded in the IGA with all the partners. And the IGA was approved by our legal unit and by all the other partners' legal units, and they've all agreed that that IGA is acceptable. So, and that's just to have parity and make sure that, I'm looking for the word, but I like to let others enjoy the pain and misery as well of
if one of us is miserable, we're all miserable.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay. So why shouldn't they sit in the chair and determine what it looks like to make those decisions, so it's not just driven by me all the time?
Right. But I think that also speaks to possibly your concern, Councilmember Smith, in that if a lieutenant, who the chief has just explained, with the additional personnel that hopefully can get approved, that person can be dedicated for that. I mean, you got a chief of police that you also now want to be an executive director of a nonprofit. As president of one and treasurer of one, I can tell you it's a lot of work. I'm not sure it's doable. And I didn't hear anybody recommend that let's roll the executive director's salary into his, so I have no idea how much that's going to impact you. But the other thing that I keep listening to is, yes, I acknowledge that it's a regional problem, but one of the things that this council has, since day one, argued for is local control. If we know our people and the services that we need better than anybody, that's why we fight constantly to bring resources and services here, and the partnerships and P3s and everything else that we talk about. Given the model that we've been presented with, the funding options and the sustainability, I think our best option, because I don't think the risk is as blatant as it's being portrayed to be. This is a 5-year window, but we haven't really expanded that boundary yet. We don't know what we can do. Like you said, $600,000 in grants that are pending. I heard a lot of the speakers that came to the podium tonight say that we also have access to additional funding mechanisms and grant opportunities. None of those have even been explored yet. So I just want to make sure that while I agree with you that it is a regional problem, who better to take care of our people than us?
Councilman Manfredi.
Chief, we've asked all the questions, I think, except one, and I'd kind of like you to guesstimate this answer for me, okay? If by some chance, all funding and grants fall through because the federal government collapses, okay? You have no money coming in, right, except from the county attorney over here, his $90,000 or whatever it is, to pay for the medical. How much would it cost the city of Maricopa?
He's a prophet.
I'm speaking Mandarin.
Yeah.
It'll be the
Worst case scenario.
It'll be the rent of the building and the utilities, sir.
So, estimate.
Um,
That is the worst case scenario.
Hang on here.
The rent is $4,000 a month,
Yes.
so $50,000 or so. Utilities, I mean, global water will kill us, but other than that.
I would, on the top side, sir, I would say
Tired, okay.
another 100,000.
Another 100,000. So let's say 150,000 is the worst case scenario. Worst case, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with a worst case scenario being $100,000, and we'll find 150 or whatever it is, $1,000 in our budget, because I believe this is an important thing and it has to get done. So if the worst case scenario, if the money that we already have goes away, if the money you already have sitting there in RICO money goes away, the worst case scenario is $150,000. Again, I'm okay with it. It's not an emotional decision. It is a financial decision because we're going to save a ton of money in overtime and sending our officers to Eloy and sending our officers to Maricopa County or sending them to Queen Creek or wherever we're sending them now. We're going to save money in gas. We're going to save money on the cars that we have driving them back and forth. So the money part is really not an issue for me, and I don't see it as an emotional issue. I see it as doing the right thing in terms of by our people. You know, if we worried about what's going to happen 5 years ago, Copper Sky wouldn't be built today. If we worried what was going to happen 5 years, you know, you can't worry about 5 years from now when we already have funding in place for 5 years, and we're giving Mary, or if Mary retires, someone else or some other person, we're giving them plenty of time. We're giving them 5 years to get some more money, $150,000. I'm pretty sure this community could raise $150,000 in 5 years. The fact that we have an against abuse building built shows that we can raise a lot more than $150,000 in 5 years. So for me, it's not a money issue, and it's not an emotional issue. For me, it's a common sense issue. It really is. It has to be built. And I prefer, and you know, my dad said it when, you know, or my mom would say it too, you know, too many cooks in the kitchen. You know, I prefer we run it. I prefer that the destiny of this advocacy center is in our hands. You know, I trust our county attorney and I trust the police chiefs of other cities and I trust everybody, but there's one person I trust more. It's going to be Chief Stahl, and I understand he's a man of integrity and he's going to do a good job. So if he tells me it's not going to cost us anything for 5 years, I'm in. Because I believe in the next 5 years, we'll find the rest of the money we need for 10 years after that. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Councilman Wade.
I don't want to belabor the point, but I just want to suggest to you that, and to the audience and my fellow council members, I carry 2 business cards in my pocket. One of them is from an organization that's been around for 47 years. And it has been a community supporter for 47 years, nonprofit. Its motto is a promise of opportunity. A promise of opportunity for those young people who are in need of support and those who would be preyed upon, that won't be preyed upon when you remove those predators from the community. The other card I have says, proud history and prosperous future. I think that we were limiting ourselves if we didn't believe just what Councilmember Manfredi said, if we didn't have the ability to be able to sustain a program that is for our community and the growth and the benefit of our community. So, as a part of an organization that's been around 47 years, it's a nonprofit, I believe that nonprofits can sustain themselves if they have the right motivation. And I believe we have the right motivation. We have the right leaders sitting on the dais, and we just have to make sure that we continue to commit to the community that has brought us forward to be their voice. And so, as I said earlier, I'm ready to go. And when you're ready to make that motion, I'll second the second that Councilmember Chapados has already put forth.
Thank you. So, Chief, a question that I have for you is regarding the 5 years from now. And I guess the question that I have pertains is that 5 years comes fast, and we all know it does, especially when things get up and clicking and we start rearranging things that maybe aren't working so well. And this is intended to be a collaboration. And as I look through the staff report and I see the commitments from these folks, while I admire the fact that they're committing now for 5 years from now, certainly costs are going to go up, expenses are going to go up, things are going to increase, and yet their contribution is not. Now, it's a 5-year contribution, which is great because it allows us to talk about that. But what happens to that? I mean, I guess what I'm looking for is some additional conveyance in the fact that while I totally understand that we're covered for 5 years, I totally understand we have a backdrop, and this makes this a simple decision. But what makes it a difficult decision is after the fact. And I need some additional assurances that we are going to continue to press forward in that time frame from a fundraising perspective, and that we're not going to wait 4 years and then try and pick up where, it's upon us. Now the pendulum has swung, and what are we going to do? Are we going to be able to find another year, 2 years, 10 years funding? To what extent do the coalition going to be having these discussions and saying, yes, we have committed for 5 years, but we have to be thinking about year 6 and year 7 and the fact that maybe year 3 things got more expensive. And so, what worked for us in year 1 through 2 maybe is not going to work so well in year 3 through 5. And so if you could talk to that, that'd be great.
Mayor Price and council members, thank you for the question. A couple things. One, when one of the speakers talked tonight, I think we saved ourselves $150,000. Because all I have to do now is let them do the construction with all their people that do the construction, and we amend the grant with OpChin so that we can use that funding for other sources, other ways to fund long-term. So I think we found another $150,000 just by listening tonight if we paid attention. But I love the question that you asked because that's what you pay me for. That's what the city manager pays me for, is to think not about tomorrow and not about next week, but I'm already thinking 5 years from now because that's what you pay me to do. And so we will, from day one, as soon as we crack ground, we will be doing fundraising opportunities with our nonprofit organizations, with some of our partnerships and things like that. And we will be talking about forecasting what is going to be the cost, the ongoing cost, because there are partners waiting in the wings wanting to come into this building already, but we don't have the room. So fortunately we have 1.5 acres, but we have no room, and there's only 4,000 square feet. So we're going to have to find ways to fundraise to build an addition onto that building so that we can house the amount of partners that want to be partners in that building. So immediately, we've already been talking, and while I love the fact that you gave Mary credit for doing this all in 3 months, she's been working on this for 1.5 years. And many of these people have attended the meetings for 1.5 years talking about how are we going to do this, what are the costs going to be, and all those things. And they've put together a vision statement and a mission statement for this center. They've started to work on policies and protocols and things like that. So to answer your question, we're already starting. We've already got the people at the table that are already starting fundraising ideas.
And that's really what I needed to hear, is I needed to know that, again, this wasn't going to go on the back burner just because we had a victory tonight, because victories tonight, dissipate in 48 hours, and then, it's what have you done for me lately,
and I understand your concerns. I understand the city manager's concerns. I absolutely get that, and I want you to know I'm already thinking 5 years.
I think, I appreciate you answering the questions. I just want to let so many people in the audience know that, I know that for having sat in the audience for so many years, sometimes you sit there and you think, geez, my goodness, haven't we just come to a decision? Can't we just move on? The reality is when you sit in these seats, you take a whole different perspective and you look to the future, you look to the pocketbook, because you're responsible to the taxpayers. You're being pulled in so many different directions. And at the end of the day, you're always hesitant to expand services that you can't afford. And so you are looking for creative ways to do things. But I think that the other side to it that I never want to underestimate is the value of debate. It's something that to me is crucially important. You know, from my perspective, is I do all that I possibly can, aside from, you know, the many, many meetings that I sit in on a daily basis, spending most of my time trying to, you know, do the next big thing and juggle 1,000 different balls in the air. At the end of the day, trying to prep for this meeting is probably one of the most difficult, because this is where you're having to compile everything, and all of the loose ends have to be tied up before you walk in here. And sometimes you come in with an idea or a thought process, having done your best to vet through it, but it's the debate that changes your mind. And I think that that's what's important. I also had the opportunity to meet with one of our speakers tonight, and you know, Priscilla knows who she is. You know, at the end of the day, I think that it's all about those meetings. It's all about the comprehensiveness and collectiveness of all the information, and that's what you're supposed to make a judgment call on. And it's not just about any one thing. Now, that one thing may tip you one side or the other. But again, if it wasn't for the debate, and honestly, if it wasn't for the work of our staff and for the debate of my colleagues and the public input, you know, I wouldn't be able to come to what I feel is the very best decision that I can reach on your behalf. And so just tying it all back together, appreciate your patience from the audience perspective. I appreciate the debate that's gone on because I've learned a lot tonight. I appreciate the back and forth, and I certainly appreciate the forecasting and the future looking, because again, too many times, not just in this city, but in all cities and in government in general, if that is not the way we look at things into the future, then we're doomed from the day that we make that decision, and that's real problematic. It's what people hate about government, and it's one of the things I think we're, as a council, always trying to change, is how are we looking towards fixing that perception. With that, the basic premise of this item is which method should we be determining the management? And really it came down to two, which was a publicly hosted, and therefore we're talking about sustainability, and then also you know, nonprofits and their pros and cons. And I have to admit that, you know, originally I had a lot of questions legally. I was able to pull aside legal just for your you know, knowledge. I was in the legal side of things, able to talk about the liability issues, the funding issues, the pass-throughs, all these things that we deal with that, again, try not to put the taxpayers at risk, but yet still, you know, help the most vulnerable in our society. And I think that at the end of the day, I too have been convinced that I think that in this particular instance and in this particular moment, the publicly hosted is the way to go. And so that would be my suggestion. And I would turn over to you, council, if you didn't have any more discussion for a motion. Another question? Before we go to the motion, let's go to one last question. Okay. All right. So let's go to the motion. Councilmember Manfredi?
I'd like to make a motion to, on 10 point, I forgot the numbers now, sorry. 10.7 to go with a publicly funded or a city-run advocacy center.
Second.
There's a motion and a second on the table, and a second, which we appreciate. Just an extra stamp of approval. Councilmember Smith, did you have a further discussion?
I believe Mr. Manfredi answered my question. Publicly funded can be interpreted two different ways, as in the fact that I think the county should own it, and that's publicly funded, versus the city. But you clarified in your motion is that the city would operate it.
Okay. So that's the motion and the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none? Yes?
I'm pondering.
Yes.
I want to give credit to the city manager, because he is and operates the city under a very conservative approach. And I almost want to put words in your mouth and say, if you had a choice of it being county or city, you'd vote county first. That's what I thought. And if you had county versus nonprofit, you'd vote county first.
I would.
That would be my preference too. So given that, I want to give him credit for standing up for what he believes in, because I think it's very important to understand that there is risk involved here. He's taken that under consideration. I know we've taken that under consideration. I take it very seriously. And given that, I have no further statements.
Thank you.
Let me just.
Yes.
I'd like to clarify, if I had my first choice, it would be county run also, with us working there, but we don't have that choice, and that's why the only choice we had right now was the nonprofit organization of some sort and city run, so that's why I'm choosing the city run.
And I would make one clarification. There was direction given throughout the course of this debate to basically saying, work with the county attorney to see the evolution that might take place over the course of 5 years.
Yeah.
Are we in agreement with that? I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't say that it's going to turn over. There's no promise that it's going to turn over, but rather it's an evolution of seeing what can transpire. Maybe it enlarges and they take on a portion of it, or whatever the case might be, but that was direction given as well. So would you
Mayor,
please keep that
members
in
of
mind?
council, absolutely. I intend to work with all of the partners to include the county every step of the way.
Perfect. With that, no other objections or discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you for your participation.
I think you have to stay there.
You have, yeah, I do.
So that takes us to 10.8, which I guess is kind of more semantics at this point, but the mayor and city council shall hear and possibly take action to approve the stakeholder agreement for the Maricopa Family Advocacy Center and authorize the city manager to make any necessary minor changes to this amendment as approved by the city attorney. This is for discussion and action.
Mayor Price, Vice Mayor Brown, and council members, this language on this IGA was taken basically from another West Valley agency that operates very similarly to how we are operating. It's agency hosted, but it's multi-agency hosted. The language was tweaked a little bit to make sure that, because we had more skin in the game, the language indicates that. I had our legal unit review it. They finally did the final authorization of the exact language. They sent it to our partners. All of our partners have reviewed the IGA. Their lawyers have reviewed the IGA, and in fact, 2 of them have already signed the IGA and have agreed to the terms of the IGA. So I would
Wonderful.
open it to any questions.
Any questions on that? Again, IGA is all set up, legally done, good to go. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Mayor, the only
Yes.
thing, it's an agreement,
Yes.
because it's not all governmental agencies, because there's private parties
Right.
too, so it's
Right.
just an agreement.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Yes, an agreement. Any other concerns on that? With that, can we have a motion, please?
Move to, second.
Motion and a second on the agreement on 10.8. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, Chief.
Council.
10.9, ordinance of the mayor and city council, City of Maricopa, Arizona, amending Article 1 through 8 of the Maricopa City Code regarding the penalty for code violations, amending Article 2 of Chapter 9 regarding penalties for property maintenance violations, and amending Chapter 10 regarding penalties for violation thereof, and providing for severability and the effective date thereof. This is for discussion and action. Martin.
Mayor and council, thank you for listening to me tonight. Last month, I was before you talking about the fact that as a code enforcement tool, we like to be able to use civil citations. This amendment would allow just that. So I'll try and kind of distill here what we're doing. Basically, the articles that are described in the title of the ordinance, we're kind of replacing some of those sections. We're combining some penalty language and process type stuff into one piece. This combines and sets up the necessary language for civil type fines for code enforcement. And these would be issued by city staff other than police, right? Remember, those are reserved that's the criminal fines. It includes an appeal process that can be heard by either city judge or a hearing officer. It sets the fines by violation, by day, according to whether it's a first offense or a second offense or anything after that. It does lay out the hearing procedures as well. and this does not affect the process or rules for criminal-type citations or fines. There is a separate policy document that is basically administrative in nature. It's kind of something that we've submitted to City Manager Rose. And the policy really sets out the code enforcement process itself. And it really kind of highlights 4 areas. It's a standard code enforcement process. That's for first offenders. Then there will be, there's a separate section for repeat offenders or properties in that process. There are inspections for nearby properties. If I have a complaint on a property and I see something next door or across the street, how we handle those. And then also interdepartment, interagency cooperation either within the city or with other agencies throughout the county. This policy document is a working document that we expect to evolve over time as we kind of figure out what works best. And of course, we'll be working with City Manager Rose to figure those things out as we go. As soon as this becomes effective, staff will be able to add this tool to our tool belt to issue citations, and hopefully that this will help us kind of get these properties into compliance with the city code and more efficiently. As I've mentioned in the past, we're very limited as to what power, what authority we have to get that compliance, and that's really what it's about. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Council, questions on this topic? Yes, Councilman Manfredi.
To clarify, a 90-year-old lady living in a home on Social Security, we're not going to kick her out of her house with fines because she can't pay that, is correct?
I'm not in the business of kicking anybody out of their house. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, we had that discussion before. That's why I wanted to make it clear. We're going to work with people.
Correct.
It's not meant as a stick to beat people down with. It's meant as a almost, I don't want to say carrot because it's not a carrot, but it's meant as a way to help people fix a problem. Right. Correct?
Mayor, Councilmember Manfredi, it really is, more than anything, is meant to get people's attention. When we send a letter, it carries very little weight. I've been known to bluff at times, but at the end of the day, if I can't follow through on the bluff, it only gets me so far. So while if we had somebody who was in real need, one of the sections of the policy document that we're working on is additional resources for those folks. We would like to, when we get into a situation, remember too, they're going to get warnings first. We're not going to go straight to citation unless it's somebody who we just keep seeing doing this over and over again. We're also working on a document that we would hand them with a citation for certain things. If it's, say, garbage or yard, overgrown weeds, things like that, or some sort of maintenance problem with their structure, say their porch is falling apart or something like that. We would like to be able to hand them something that says, here are the resources that you can contact that may be able to help you.
Good.
I can't bring my lawnmower with me and just do it.
Right.
But here are some folks who may be able to help. I know Councilmember Chapados and I have had a couple conversations about, I think it was just Friends of Maricopa or something like that.
Copa Cares.
Copa Cares.
Copa Cares.
That was active a while back. And organizations like that, sort of citizens helping citizens just because they care and for no other reason. So we'd like to be able to connect those organizations with the folks that need it.
And this gives people the ability to ask for help.
Correct.
When they get the notice, they can say, I can't fix that, and then we can go forward and help them.
Correct.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Manfredi, I know where you're going with that, but at the same time, I would play the opposite side just a little bit in the fact that, sometimes there are people that play us, and they know the system too, and they know that we can dilly-dally and, cause problems to the neighbors and to, public safety hazards and all these different problems. And then by the time we go through the court system, here we are 6-9 months later, and we're just getting around to first version of a citation, so to speak. And, at this point, people are irate and angry, and, that's just taking too long. So we do need to speed that process up and have a process by which to do it with a little bit of teeth attached to it, when that need arises. But I think you're absolutely right. We err on the side of caution until the point in which, they've proved their merit and it has become anything but a willingness to work together to solve a problem. And upon that determination, clearly we have some enforcement capabilities. So it kind of kills two birds with one stone there.
Mayor, can I add a couple of things?
Yeah,
to
please.
that? The first one is there is an appeal process that is built into to this document. And that would allow for someone who feels like they either have no choices or they are, maybe there's an error in some fashion or they didn't get notice or, whatever it is, that they can come to either the judge or the public hearing officer to say, look, I'm working on this, I'd like to make some arrangements, and then that person would have the ability to lower or erase the fine and provide for additional time, or say, okay, come back in 60 days and we'll talk about it. They can pretty much do whatever they want. So that is kind of that's the release valve for us to say, okay. But the other part of that too is that when we're assessing fines, what'll happen is if we're not collecting on those fines, if nothing happens, those will build up over time. As they build up, again, we would go before the judge, the hearing officer, to kind of finalize that. And then, but the only way to collect on that at that point is to put a lien on the property. When there's a lien on the property, again, nothing happens until something happens to the property. Either they sell or the city forecloses. If we were to foreclose on a property, it would come back to city council for that approval, would it not?
Honorable Mayor.
I'm not entirely clear on that final process, but.
Yeah, I think the intention is certainly to, we would not seek foreclosure on a person because of their demonstrated inability to repair a problem. We would eventually repair that problem ourselves and probably place a lien on the property, but that lien would not be sought until the property is sold. So that's one issue. The other issue has to do with those that are elderly or disabled. They're not able bodies. I think our desire is to partner with nonprofits and faith-based organizations to pair them with those individuals so that they can find assistance, and only proceed with trying to lien the property and correct it ourselves when absolutely necessary.
And I think it's good to point out too that I apologize, that was a reminder to me. In this year's budget, we do have a line item for abatement that the city can take care of that, and then we kind of handle the rest of that later. So,
Perfect. Councilmember Chapados.
Martin, thank you for bringing this forward. I know in the HOA Managers Luncheon and serving on the HOA board, this is an issue that neighborhoods deal with constantly, and the mayor's absolutely right. There's those cases where the community can step up and the HOA can help, but I think it's truly a collaborative effort where, we have more teeth collectively than we do individually. And you're absolutely right. The whole purpose of this is the voluntary compliance. But it is a great attention getter. I mean, you have people that move into a new place and just refuse to pay their assessments. That not only creates a problem for that house, but everybody that lives around them has to suffer from inactivity, not keeping up their property. So I really appreciate you bringing this forward.
Any other questions or concerns or comments on this? If not, can we have a motion?
Move to approve ordinance 17-0.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second. So with that, any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Smith? Yes. Councilmember Wade?
Yes.
Councilmember Chapados?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Yes?
Councilmember Manfredi?
Yes.
Councilwoman Gussie?
Yes.
Mayor Price?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
10.10, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Maricopa, amending section 8-8-26 of the Maricopa City Code regarding exemptions to the requirements for massage establishment licenses and providing for the severability and the effective date thereof. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This amendment basically will effectively allow licensed, legitimate massage therapy professionals to provide their services in other people's homes by exempting them from certain sections of city code that would ordinarily prohibit a business to operate in a residential neighborhood outside of the regulations that concern home-based occupations. That's distilling it down as far as I can get it.
Yep.
Happy to answer any questions or field them to Dennis.
Yeah. Any questions on this, council? It's pretty straightforward and basic in the fact that we're trying to promote businesses, especially with more and more businesses having less and less on brick and mortar locations. We know that's obviously a challenge here in Maricopa to make a living, especially if you're a small home-based business, et cetera. So I think that that meets the the overall goal of this council to promote small business, and I see that moves us in the right direction. So if there's no other questions or concerns.
I have one question.
Oh, yes, council member.
And just curious, what remedies do we have if someone begins to operate outside of legitimate business in this particular enterprise? Could perhaps the chief answer that question?
That's a great question.
Mayor Price, Vice Mayor Brown, and Councilman Wade, it would be like any other police investigation. Now, granted, we're not going to know unless there's a complainant. The fear I have with this, the primary fear I have with this change is victims who are robbed during the illegal act often don't report their victimization. And so sometimes these are very hidden crimes that go on for a long period of time before they finally come to the police department's attention. And then by that time, it's a very long, drawn-out investigation that could include conspiracy and a whole bunch of other things. But we do have the normal legal law enforcement remedies to address it.
Okay, so the victim come forward and then you go into your regular investigation to see if, and the only concern that I have is that the operator would come forward and suggest that we have allowed them to operate in legitimate business. Maybe the other person felt cheated or didn't want to pay that much or what have you. That would be my concern.
Again, Mayor Price, Vice Mayor Brown, and Councilman Wade, I understand. I believe I understand your concern. These are hard investigations just because they're he said, she said from the get-go, and then we have to do a long investigation that thankfully you okayed our advocacy center tonight, which would be part of this process with these interview rooms in the advocacy center to help do these things, part of which are confrontation phone calls, one of our tricks that we use to get people to confess without knowing they're confessing.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Chapados.
Yeah, Chief, don't go away yet. I'm just wondering if this is something that we might be able to partner with the HOAs to do a little bit of an awareness and education campaign to say that, you know, for any contractor that you have services with, I mean, if they rip you off, if they do something you're uncomfortable with, you really need to step up and let somebody know, let you guys know about that. I'd be willing to start with the HOA Managers Luncheon if that would help.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Councilwoman, absolutely, this would be a great topic, a segue into that topic, because there are a lot of hidden crimes out there that don't get reported because they don't know that it's a crime or how to report it, how to identify it even.
Right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Any other questions? Yes, Martin.
I
you have
think
another
it's
comment?
I think it's safe to make a statement that we're really talking about two issues. So one is those legitimate businesses. The other one is a crime.
Mm-hmm.
So as we're talking about this, if they're going to commit crime, it doesn't matter what this ordinance says. That it's just going to happen. If I had to guess, again, I don't know this for a fact, if I had to guess, I'd say there are massage therapists already out there doing this. There are home health care professionals out there providing their services in people's homes. Any others, I don't know if they do, at-home tattoos or something, whatever. I just don't know. But physical therapists, respiratory therapists, nurses, home nurses, things like that, these all kind of fall under that same category from a use standpoint, where we're saying it's not exactly a home-based business, because a home-based business has rules that you do it in your house, you don't have people that come there, you know, basically you have an office in your house, and there's no real evidence of a business being there. That's not what this is. This is them going out into the residential areas and providing a service, whether it's because they don't want to go and rent an office, or whether it's because the people that they're providing the services to can't get out of their homes. I don't know which, but again, from a zoning, from a use, from a planning standpoint, this type of service I think is necessary and doesn't really fall into the category of what it falls into under our current code. So that's really where we're at. Again, the criminal aspect of it isn't going to change either way. So.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or concerns? Seeing none, can I have a motion, please?
Move to approve ordinance 17-07.
Have a motion, is there a second? Motion and a second. With
Correction, 17-06.
Thank you. Can I get an amended second?
I amend the second to 17-06.
Perfect. Thank you. That takes us to roll call, please.
Councilman Manfredi?
I'd like to abstain, actually. My daughter is a massage therapist.
Councilmember Wade?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Chapados?
Yes.
Councilwoman Gussie?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Price?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. And on to 10.11, ordinance 17-07, an ordinance of the mayor and city council of the city of Maricopa, Arizona, amending section 2-62 of the city code to provide the council with the authority to call special elections for initiative and referendum measures, and providing for the severability and declaring this ordinance to be an emergency measure that is operative immediately as provided by law. Discussion and action. Dennis.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is an ordinance, really it's kind of a clarification we want to make to our city code. We've never had a potential referendum since the legislature changed when our elections are held. This just gives the city the option to hold them on specific dates that the city will direct. So this is just, we're not setting any election, we're just adding to our code to give us the option if the council wants to do that.
Perfect. Any questions on that, council?
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of ordinance 17-07.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Wade?
Yes.
Councilmember Manfredi?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Brown?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith? Councilmember Chapados?
Yes.
Councilwoman Gussie?
Yes.
Mayor Price?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. And 10.12, the mayor and city councilors are here, a presentation of the activities of the state legislature. I know this is what you wanted to hear at this hour. We're thankful for our faithful audience members who we paid to be here, and we're especially thankful for Dale, who's going to give us the exciting recap of what the legislature did to hurt us this year. Take it away, Dale.
Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, and guest. Who I invited. No, he's leaving. He was here for the last item. I'd like to be really as brief as possible because we've been here so long. I'll do my best at that because it's difficult for me personally to do that. The legislature adjourned on May 10th, my birthday. It was the greatest present I've ever received. 122 days of session, which is roughly average for this legislature over the last decade or so. They passed 353 bills, 11 got vetoed, and so those are kind of normal numbers as well. I think the most predominant issue that we were looking at through this year was the university bonding proposal, which I talked about at my legislative halftime report a few weeks back. Originally, a proposal said 30 million of the state money and 6.5 of the city and town and county money. In the end, there was no city, town, or county money used for this, and it's not a capture of the TPT. It's an appropriation that goes on for many, many years. So we got out of that one pretty easily. We had strange bedfellows. We had conservatives that hated the idea of giving the money to the universities in perpetuity, and we had Democrats who said you can't commingle cities and higher education. They are separate entities. So it was really a very, very good victory for us, and the universities still got their money. I'm going to talk about him in a second, but I'm going to shout him out now too. Vince Leach was really a champion on this issue. He was very, very vociferous in his opposition to both commingling cities and higher ed as well as the perpetuity issue. Which brings me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the construction sales tax, which we spent hours on, even though we all kind of knew it wasn't going to go anywhere. And obviously it would hurt the city of Maricopa greatly because it was going to be point of sale. We don't have major construction material outlets here. And again, Vince Leach was really, really important to us in defeating that measure. The rest of the session kind of looked like they always do. I've been at this now for, working for city or cities, 11 years, and there's always a tax on local control. This was a part of our debate earlier on a different subject matter, but it really is something that when we look at why do they do it, the best answer is because they can. Because they simply have that ability to do it. And when we argue, well, it's, you know, you don't like the federal government telling the state what to do, they tell me personally many, many times, well, it's different. We created you, whereas the states created the federal government. And I've actually turned that back to senators and representatives from the podium when they, you know, I said, I know you're going to say this, Senator Farnsworth. And so I understand your argument already. So anyways, a couple of things that are particularly pertinent to us, I think. One, of course, is the Santan Corporation, which was the first bill signed. We fought that bill for many, many years. It's also interesting right now that there's some controversy out there related to the Johnson Utility Company and a particular lobbyist, and how they were often the major force from the private sector opposing Santan's incorporation. And then obviously the cities and the league were, you know, the public sector opposition. And then that opposition from that utility company kind of went away this last year. George Johnson had no lobbyist down at the Capitol this year. And it was Jim Norton, the lobbyist who's been indicted, who was the guy that fought this for years on behalf of George. And so it's just kind of an interesting timing issue, I think, as well. The other bill that passed just towards the very end of session is Senate Bill 1152 that requires all sales tax elections to go to the ballot in the fall of even years. Now, there is a delayed effective date on this bill, which is good for us because of the RTA issue. We are going to the ballot on that in this fall. And Prescott's actually going this spring to an election of their citizens in order to fund their public safety retirement system, because they had that tragic Yarnell firefighter deaths. And so their rates got jacked up. They already had a lot of liability. And so it was their lobbyists that got the extension until, the bill's not effective till January 1 of 2018. So we came out ahead on that one. I've consulted with our legal counsel and several other attorneys. We don't think we think it only applies if you're going to an election for your sales tax increase, not you as a body voting to increase the sales tax, because it's in Title 16, which is the election statute. It is not in Title 9, the city statute. And so that's a relief for us in some respects. And I don't know if this city has ever gone to an election on a sales tax issue or not. We do have cities that have it in their charter that they must. One of those cities will sue, I guarantee it. And then we'll see how that plays out. There were several measures that we worked on very vigorously to amend, both from the small cell issue related to 5G coming into cities and towns, also the GPLET measure. Overall, I'd say it was kind of a normal year and a very abnormal business. Again, because they can. Any successes that we really had down there are attributable to constant presence and teamwork. The league did its usual good job, and I just can't say enough about Policy Development Group and Todd Baumann. When I couldn't be down there, there is a distance issue from Maricopa to the state capitol. Todd was there, ears and eyes for me, and sometimes the voice for us as well. We strategize well together. We talk all the time. He helped me with new connections. He strengthened old ones. He got me in doors I couldn't have gotten in beforehand. And he's also a really great sounding board for me because I have a focus for the city of Maricopa, and sometimes there's a broader arena that we have to look at. And with Todd's experience and Policy Development Group's experience and their contacts across the political spectrum, it's good for me to have somebody else to talk to. So I would like to ask Todd to come up and say a couple of words, and then I'll go through some budget items, and then I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dale. Honorable Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. Todd Bowman with Policy Development Group. I did just want to say a few words, and thank you, first off, for letting us represent you at the legislature this year. It really was a pleasure to represent the city of Maricopa. Every session, there's always over 1,000 bills introduced, so that gives you the opportunity to go in and meet with members, a lot of times on bills that they're sponsoring, that they want to see passed, that you don't want to see passed. And so it always affords a kind of unique opportunity to go in there and present your side. And one of the things that I really appreciated this year was that we did that again. And with Dale, when we went in and we had those conversations, one of the things that I think serves your city very well, and I was very proud to represent your city, was that we went in, and Dale particularly did a masterful job of presenting the city's position, and a lot of times that was in opposition, and sometimes they would agree, sometimes they wouldn't. But what we always walked away with was a respect, and they always appreciated the way that the issue was framed and the frankness and the honesty that we dealt with. So when we came back in the next time to talk to them about another issue, they didn't have a bad taste in their mouth. So I really think that served the city of Maricopa well, and I think Dale particularly led well in that regard. I've been down there 11 sessions, and I will say that I think the city of Maricopa has a good reputation. I think you're seen as a city that is growing, a city that wants to work within what the state of Arizona has, the framework that we have, and wants to work with the legislature. And so I commend you on that. I think that sets the city of Maricopa up well for future years. I think it really does provide an opportunity for next session and beyond. The president of the Senate, the Speaker of the House, they're 30 to 40 minutes away from town hall here. So the leadership from the legislature is geographically fairly close to Maricopa. And so I really look forward to, Dale and I have already started brainstorming and planning a little bit in this off session, what can we do to help continue foster those relationships. So we're excited about that. I think networking with staff at the legislature and agencies, I think that will help solidify Maricopa's good relationship with the state. So with that, thank you very much, and I really appreciate it.
Vice Mayor?
Todd, I wanted to ask either you or Dale, perhaps both, do you anticipate that there might be one or two pieces of legislation that did not get approved that might be reintroduced next session that will be detrimental to us or hurtful?
Construction sales tax. Regina Cobb was the sponsor this year. She's representative out of District 5. She lives in Kingman. She's a dentist. I don't know why I threw that part in, but maybe because I think she should be wise. She was very frustrated with her loss this year on this particular bill. But she has been told by so many legislators, including Mr. Leach, that you have to sit down and work with the cities on this. And there was a construction sales tax task force that was chaired by John Cross, the manager of Queen Creek, that looked at a variety of options, and that will be resurrected. And I do think we need to do something about it, because we had a certain system. We tried to do tax simplification 3 years ago, 4 years ago. That's when I first met the mayor. And we solved some of the problem, but we left some for future times, and then we tried some other convoluted method. We do need to do something, and I think one of the main focus points for Governor Brewer was the small business owner, working in multiple jurisdictions and having to learn multiple tax rates. And so that was sort of the drive for this. And so it might be one of those things where one day somebody just goes, oh, we do it this way. And everybody goes, that's it. But nobody's come up with that light bulb yet. That will come back. I absolutely guarantee you that will come back. There'll also probably be another attempt at oh, I had it, now I lost it. Thank you. Occupational licensing. And you just did something about massages. So that's one of the ones that this city happens to license. Because there is a movement from the governor's office on down to free up businesses more. So I think that will show up again as well. Interestingly, that was really curtailed when they were starting to talk about Phoenix, for example, licenses exotic dancers. And that kind of got the hackles of a lot of people up right there. Well, we better license them. So that was kind of an interesting debate point. I think construction sales tax, occupational licenses, do you think of anything else off the top of your head? Or, yeah, construction sales tax will probably be our biggest issue. But again, I think we should be able to develop a solution to this. And if we offer it, and we go to the builders, and we go to the contractors, and we go to the Small Business Association, and we come, it's like, what do you think of this? I think that would be good for us. It would be good for us for our image at the Capitol, that we came to the table with a solution, instead of just being seen as the caucus of no, which is, having worked at the League for a decade, I can tell you that was the reputation. I also signed in my last year at the League 44 times and testified 25, and they were all no. But this year I wasn't quite so antagonistic. Thank you. Real quickly on the budget. I mentioned the university budget proposal. They are going to grant money to the universities over a long period of time. They do have inflationary measures in there so that it keeps up with inflation. But again, no city or town or county money. We are getting a little bit more HERF money this year. They did sweep, the convoluted formula here. So they swept 99, but then they were going to give us back 14.4, and then they're going to give us another 3 million over here. It's very bizarre how they did it, but essentially we're going to get, as a combined cities and towns, about 14 and a half, 15 million, somewhere in that range. Their plan, now I know legislative intent is always subject to changes of mind and elections, but their plan is to wean DPS off of her funding and get us back to where we should be. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I'm going to guess over the course of the last 12 or 13 years, it's well over $1 billion that have been swept out of local government HER funding to fund DPS. DPS needs a dedicated source of funding, whatever that may be. There were some bills this year that tried to do it with new types of vehicle licensing and gas taxes and et cetera, and those didn't go anywhere. So we are going to get a little bit more HERF money as well. And we are going to still be paying for the Department of Revenue's collection services, auditing services, administrative services. And then they actually increased the amount for additional state aid, dealing with the 1% cap issue this year. Last year there was $7 million that they provided. This year it was $24 million. And the state had said that they were never going to appeal that court decision that we won, essentially, which was good. The last thing I want to talk about, there are two things really. One is that we're still awaiting the Supreme Court's decision on Senate Bill 1487, which was a bill that was done in 2016 that penalizes cities and towns that violate state law and then withholds shared revenue. That was heard by the Supreme Court February 28th. We're still awaiting that decision. That will have a monumental impact on the relationship between the legislature and municipalities. So we'll just have to wait and see when that shows up. And then lastly, I talked to the League the other day. The new laws report should be coming out within the next week or two, and that'll be the comprehensive document that outlines all the bills that passed this year that affect municipalities. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Council questions? Thank you, Dale.
Got
Thank
you
you,
at the
Todd.
end of the night.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
Thank you. Well, with that, we appreciate everybody hanging in there, and can I have a motion to move to E-session, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Stand adjourned for 2 weeks.